Well, good morning, everyone, and I'd like to welcome you to the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District Governing Board meeting. We have board members participating in person at our office in Fresno, Bakersfield, and Modesto. We will do our best to facilitate a smooth meeting with public participation via Zoom and webcast. Before we begin, here are some important guidelines and general instructions. Please silence any of your communication devices, such as your phones, your cell phones. During the meeting, all public participants will be placed in a mute hold. Public members will not be able to mute or unmute their phones. Audio for members of the public will be muted once they are audio for members of the public will be unmuted once they are recognized to make a public comment. After each agenda item, the chair will announce public comment. The clerk will recognize any public attendee who has indicated they wish to speak. So with that, Madam Clerk, can we have the roll call?
Good morning. Mr. Bessinger.
Here.
Mr. Couch.
Here.
Ms. Lewis.
Here.
Mr. McCauley. Mr. Mendez.
Here.
Dr. Pacheco Warner.
Here.
Mr. Pereira. Mr. Preciado. Mr. Rickman. Mr. Robinson.
Here.
Dr. Sheriff.
Here.
Ms. Chiklian.
Here.
Mr. Chiesa. Through the chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. And I'd like to ask everyone to stand, and I've asked Board Member Mendez to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Ready, salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to, do we have our clerk read the items on the consent agenda first? No, okay. Okay, at this time, I'd like to request approval of the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Or do we have roll call?
We do need to call for public comment, and then it has to be by roll call.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. Is there any board comment, or is there an item on the consent agenda that a board member would like to pull for discussion? And I'm sorry for not recognizing that. I see no board member. Does this require a public also? So are there any public comments on the consent agenda calendar?
Are there any public commenters in Bakersfield?
No public comment in Bakersfield.
Thank you. Are there any public comments in Modesto?
No public comment in Modesto.
Thank you. There are no public comments in Fresno and no indication of public comments online.
Thank you. So now we can move forward with the vote. And we'll have roll call.
Okay. Mr. Bessinger?
Yes.
Mr. Couch?
Yes.
Ms. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Mendez?
Yes.
Dr. Pacheco Warner?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Dr. Sheriff?
Yes.
Ms. Chiklian?
Yes.
Through the chair, motion passes.
Thank you. So we'll move to item number 6, the star recognition.
I'm sorry, number 5.
General public.
Oh, I'm sorry. I crossed that one out. Forgive me. Okay, we have the general public comment at this time. It's made available for comments from the public on matters within the board's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda. It is requested that no comments be made during this period on items on the agenda. The public may make comments on each board agenda item during the time allowed for public comments on that item. Attention is called to the fact that the board is prohibited by law from taking action on matters discussed that are not on the agenda. Do we have any public comments?
Are there any public comments in Bakersfield?
No public comment in Bakersfield.
Thank you. Are there any public comments in Modesto?
No public comments in Modesto.
Thank you. Don't see any public comments in the Fresno office. I do have one online commenter, Connie Young.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, I'm Connie Young, Fresno resident, retired registered nurse, and volunteer with Citizens Climate Lobby, also known as CCL, and I'm a member of the Earth Day Fresno planning team. Like you, I was glad to see the acknowledgement in the American Lung Association's State of the Air report of the improvement in the number of days and levels of short-term pollution, year-round particle pollution, and ozone pollution. Congratulations to all who helped make this possible. Your board and staff, local air quality advocacy organizations, and Valley residents who took individual actions to help clean our air. I'd like to remind you about Earth Day Fresno, the annual community-wide Earth Day celebration that will be held at Fresno City College this Saturday, which is Earth Day. The Fresno County Bicycle Coalition will kick things off with a group bike ride from the fountain in front of City Hall to Earth Day Fresno. They'll meet at 9:30 a.m. and take off at 10 a.m. Cyclists will be able to use the free valet bike parking, and there will be a bike clinic and a limited number of free bicycles given away to kids. The event will be held on the mall in the center of the campus. Parking in the solar-covered lot along McKinley Avenue will be free. There will be at least 60 local environmental nonprofits, including Citizens Climate Lobby, and agencies, including the Air District and green vendors, as well as food trucks, kids' activities, and live entertainment provided by local student groups and others. 7 local car dealers are providing 15 different electric vehicles for test drives all day long. Visitors will need to register at the north end of the mall to take a drive. Kids and adults alike will enjoy participating in a samba parade that will make its way through the event in the afternoon. Come and make a shaker and a silly hat and join in the fun. I hope to see you at Earth Day Fresno from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. at Fresno City College this Saturday. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie Young.
There's no further indication of public comment.
Thank you very much. Now we can move on to item 6, star recognition.
Good morning. Shanika Dixon, Director of Personnel. As you all are aware, recognition of employees' contributions is an essential component of the district STAR work culture. So today, we would like to formally recognize those employees who have reached a service milestone here in the first quarter of 2023. So we have a few of our staff who will be on Zoom, and we have one person who is in office today. So if you could stand and remain standing when I call your name, that would be great. Thank you so much for your commitment to the district and all that you do here, have done here over the years. We appreciate your contributions. So in Fresno, celebrating 5 years of service, we have Dio Carrillo, Senior Accountant. Do we have the others on Zoom? Okay. For 15 years of service, we have Jeff Riding, Senior Air Quality Specialist, and Nathan Trevino, Supervising Air Quality Instrument Technician. So these are employees who have reached their milestone this quarter. Congratulations to you all, and thank you for your service. It was a short list this time. Thank you so much.
Well, I want to, excuse me, also personally thank our employees, and also it's an indication of a good organization to work for when you can even keep an employee for 5 years, let alone 15, 20 years and moving forward. So Congratulations to the staff and thank you to all of the staff here who do such a wonderful job in serving our community. Okay, moving forward to item 7, a report on the District Citizens Advisory Committee activities.
Of the Nisei Farmers League, also the chair of the Citizens Advisory Committee. Before you in your packet, you have the report. Good morning, board members, chair, and Samir and executive staff and the staff. In your packet, I know you've got a long agenda. I'm going to be here, so you'll be saved. I'm going to be leaving here shortly because I have an annual meeting with 200 growers over at an Armenian home where we have events. So 200 growers, we're going to be excited to hear what they want to tell me today. So I'm going to be here for a few minutes and then leaving. But in your packet, I think some of the most highlight things is that the CAC, which it represents the city, the environmental, and the business and ag, unanimously sent a letter to the governor asking for the farmer funding to be reinstated because of the importance of that program and what it does. And so that was a very important item. And I think to have everybody unanimously signing on to that letter really sends a tremendous amount of support coming from the environmental community and even the cities that use that as well. Also on the committee, the update was we had added an EJAG individual back to reappointment to the group, which represents the city's part. Was Mr. O'Brien was unanimously supported, nominated back to the committee of the city side on the EJAG. If there's any questions, I know you have a big day ahead of you. So if there's any questions on what's in the report, I'd be happy to try to answer. Again, I want to thank Samir and the staff for all the work they've done. I know that last week, just for my own, I had a African-American farmer come to my office whose farm was back clear in the 1800s. So to hear that farmer come to my office and ask about a tractor, and he was a young age of 81, and he has 40 acres, but he's had it for forever. But he came to the office to ask for a tractor, if he could get one, because the tractor he has is a 1951, and it has some problems. But again, it was just so great that he can come to my office, fill out the paperwork, and we're going to turn it in. But if it wasn't for the farmers program that you set up for the 3 different types, sizes, it would have never happened. So I just want to make that comment. It's out of line. I know it's not in the CAC report, but I just needed to present that. And again, thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Manuel Cunio, and thank you for your report. And it's good to hear those side stories about our small farmers who are in need of help, and to feel free to come to your organization to ask for help. And I hope that that comes to fruition real quickly, that he's able to get that tractor. Thank you again.
We got one person wants to talk.
Oh, I'm sorry. We have one of
Oh,
our,
you don't want to talk now? Oh, okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair. I just wanted to say that, I really want to express my gratitude to the CAC for working together on these letters. I think that it's really powerful when all the groups are able to come together and write these unanimous letters for the things that we care about, and really appreciate you all working as a group. Thank you.
no other board comments. We'll move on to
Through
item.
the chair, I just wanted to notify you that Supervisor Pereira is in attendance now.
All right, thank you very much. So we'll move to item 8, and I believe this is a public hearing. Am I correct on that? Okay. And it is to receive and file California Air Resources Board Program Review of District Administration of the State Air Pollution Reduction Incentive Program.
Hey, good morning, Madam Chair and board member. This is Samir. Just wanted to quickly introduce the item. as the board here knows, we fight very hard as a valley to advocate and bring resources into the valley. You heard a wonderful story earlier about the way that those resources are used to help small farmers and residents and others basically invest in clean air technologies. And these programs have been a source of pride in the valley. We operate a large grant program through this local advocacy. We've been able to cobble together quite a bit of state and federal funding. One of the things that is a critical component of running these programs is the auditing process, whereby we have third party, in this case CARB, review the operation of those programs. It's always a great source of information in terms of how well those programs are being run and whether there's anything that can be done to improve the operation of those programs. I'm happy to present Todd DeYoung, who's our director of our grant programs, who worked with his team over a quite a lengthy period to have an auditing over. I think that's actually the biggest audit of its kind ever done. So really happy to present this item to the board and to the public, and we'll turn it over to Todd to walk through the results of the audit.
Thank you, Samir, and good morning, Madam Vice Chair, members of the board. Again, Todd DeYoung, Director of Grants and Incentives, here seeking your board's action to receive and file the CARB program review of the district state incentive program implementation. Just by way of a brief background, the California Air Resources Board is responsible for the oversight of the state's voluntary incentive programs. 35 air districts in California administer these voluntary incentive programs on behalf of the state. And as part of that oversight responsibility, CARB is responsible for conducting these periodic reviews of the program implementation. There's various different programs that CARB oversees. So as part of that annual regular review process, CARB comes in and takes a look at the administration of these programs. As such, CARB recently conducted a comprehensive review of the state incentive programs that are administered by our district. This was a 15-month process, a very lengthy process. It started in September of 2021 and concluded at the end of 22 in December. The final report was just released about a month ago, and we received that report and provided a response letter, which you have in your packet. This was also supplemented by a State of California Department of Finance fiscal compliance audit, which looked at the same programs over the same fiscal years and the same timeframes. And that companion audit was presented to your board back in August of 2022. So this particular program review, as Samir stated, was actually the largest air district focused incentive program review conducted by CARB to date, as measured by the number of fiscal years reviewed, the number of incentive programs, individual programs, number of projects that were represented by the review, as well as the total funding represented by the review. 11 fiscal years were represented, 9 distinct incentive programs, which I'll go through in just a moment, representing almost 13,500 individual incentive program projects, and again, totaling more than $623 million in state funding. So program reviews such as these are extremely important to the district because, as you are aware, regulations alone are not enough to bring the district into attainment with the ever-tightening federal ambient air quality standards. The incentive-based measures play an increasingly critical role in transitioning Valley fleets to the newest clean air vehicles and equipment and addressing the Valley's air quality challenges. Towards that end, the district has developed and implemented a very robust and effective voluntary incentive program suite. The district views these program reviews, such as the one we just went through, as really great opportunities to reinforce the areas in which we do well, things that we're doing right, as well as make those recommended enhancements working with CARB to ensure that the district remains effective and efficient and fiscally responsible in all areas of our program administration. So again, this program review covered fiscal years 2010 and 11 through 2018 and 19. The only caveat there is one of the programs actually included the 2008-2009 fiscal year because it wasn't included in the previous program review, so they brought that into this program review. CARB has established policies and procedures that they use. This consisted of a combination of in-person interviews with district staff, both on the program side as well as the fiscal side, district management. We conducted multiple interviews and had multiple conversations through that 15-month period. They did physical file reviews. They pulled files and went through the entire file on hundreds of different grant projects, as well as they did physical inspections of completed projects. They actually went out and looked at some of these projects to make sure that they were still doing what they intended to do, whether it be a tractor or a truck or something like that. They actually went and did these physical inspections to make sure that these projects were still achieving their intended purpose. The CARB reviews these CARB conducts these reviews to ensure that the expenditures of grant funds are done in accordance with the program guidelines and then within those legal requirements of the grant programs. They selected their projects based on an overall mixture of the funds and the different types of projects that were funded under those fiscal years that were under this review. So this slide just summarizes the 9 different programs that were included in the review. The first one being the Carl Moyer program. This funds anything from on-road and off-road equipment replacement, agricultural irrigation pumps. This is one of our larger and more long-standing programs. The Community Air Protection Program funds the AB 617 efforts that the district is engaged in, as well as valley-wide programs that are geared towards disadvantaged communities. The Goods Movement Emission Reduction Program, otherwise known as our Proposition 1B program, focuses on goods movement along the trade corridors throughout the state, and in particular, the I-5 and the 99 corridor, which means truck replacement projects, locomotive projects, anything that moves goods throughout the valley. The Farmer program focuses on tractor replacement projects, zero emission agricultural UTVs. We've done farm truck replacements, but it focuses on those agricultural activities. The Low Carbon Transportation program focused on 2 CARB demonstration projects that the district engaged in, the Green On-Road Linen Delivery Project, as well as the Ecosystems of Shared Mobility Project. The Lower Emission School Bus Program and the Diesel Emission Reduction Act program, or DERA program, those were a combination of funds that went in to fund the statewide Lower Emission School Bus Program. The district was the statewide administrator for the Lower Emission School Bus Program for a number of years during this review period. And then finally, the Enhanced Fleet Modernization and Clean Cars for All program. This program funds the district's Drive Clean and the San Joaquin Replacement Program. It's our light-duty scrap and replace program, for which the district actually piloted several years ago, and then that led to the creation of the statewide program. So again, the program review further strengthened the partnership with CARB. Over that 15-month period, we learned a lot from each other. They learned the challenges of implementation on the ground of a lot of these programs. We learned from them their perspective and how they're developing these programs and the things that they need to do to make sure that they're meeting their intent. But it was a great learning opportunity, and it really strengthened that bond between CARB and district staff and management. We played a prominent lead role in developing and enhancing several of these programs during this review period, including the Farmer Program guidelines, which we helped to create, the Carl Moyer Program, which we've been intimately involved in since its inception more than 25 years ago. The EFMP and Clean Cars for All program, like I said, we piloted this program several years ago, which led to the statewide creation of this program. And then again, we served as the statewide administrator for the Lower Emission School Bus Program for several years on behalf of the state. So the results of the audit, both the CARB program review and the DOF fiscal compliance audit revealed no findings. The CARB program review stated that the 9 district incentive programs reviewed are achieving their emission reductions and program objectives in an efficient and an effective manner. The DOF fiscal compliance audit likewise stated that the incentive program's revenues, expenditures, and resulting balances were in compliance with applicable grant agreements, guidelines, and statutes. The district was commended for successfully administering the statewide lower mission school bus program for all those years on behalf of CARB. And we were also commended on our program material design elements, which made our programs easy to understand and easy to access for the general public. As with all program reviews, there's a lot to learn, and we learned a lot of information through this process. And as part of our continual improvement process here at the district, this program review did highlight several suggestions for potential administrative enhancements, things from, you know, how we label our photographs in our inspection reports to how we deal with our dealer network and our light duty scrap and replace program. Some really good information there. And as those came up during that 15-month process, we actually started working on those enhancements right away. We didn't wait until the report came out and then to start working on those. So we've already done a lot of work to implement a lot of the enhancements that CARB suggested in their report. And again, we'll continue to work closely with CARB as necessary to implement these suggestions. And then if those necessitate maybe changes to the guidelines in some of these programs, we're going to work with CARB on making those changes. So with that, that actually concludes my presentation. But before I bring it back to the board, I'd like to introduce Tess Seacat. Tess Seacat works for CARB. She's a longtime colleague, and she is the branch chief of the Incentives and Technology Advancement branch at CARB. And she has agreed to say a few words this morning. So Tess.
Thank you, Todd. Yes, as Todd said, I'm the Tess Seacat, and I'm the chief of the Incentives and Technology Advancement branch at the California Air Resources Board. And I wanted to thank you and the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District staff for working with CARB staff throughout the course of this program review, and the Department of Finance fiscal audit as well. This was an extensive and longer than normal program review, spanning 11 fiscal years and 9 incentive programs. We could not have completed it without your staff professionalism, cooperative efforts, and continuous coordination with our staff. Our review confirms that CARB's ongoing partnership with the district is contributing significantly to the air quality improvements of the San Joaquin Valley Air Basin and providing opportunities to numerous grantees within the basin to cost effectively reduce public exposure to harmful emissions. Furthermore, we want to highlight that the district's accomplishment for successfully managing and dispersing funds for the statewide lower emission school bus program and serving as the statewide administrator of the DERA, Diesel Emission Reduction Act program as well. The program review and the fiscal audit identified no findings, as Todd mentioned, but we did discuss 4 recommendations with the district staff and those improvements for emissions, the incentive programs to increase, continue effectiveness and efficiency and transparency. We look forward to our continuing work with the district, improving their already successful programs. Thank you again for your partnership and administering and implementing the state-sponsored incentive programs that efficiently and effectively achieved emission reductions. A last nod to district staff on their cooperation. They did a bang-up job. Thank you.
Thank you, Tess.
Thank you, Tess Seacat, for your comments and the success of the collaboration of our organization with CARB. It's good to hear that, you know, these 2 government agencies are able to work together successfully to accomplish what needs to be accomplished in our district. Thank you very much. And thank you, Todd, for a good presentation. So I will bring this to the board for comment. Mr. Bessinger?
Thank you. Todd Smear, this is $653 million over 11 years, and there are no issues. That's really huge. With so many programs and so many moving pieces, staff did an excellent job. I'd also like to thank CARB for coming out, doing the audit, and getting into the weeds on some of the making sure that things are being properly done after we give the money so that we know if we need to change our program. So kudos CARB too. Thank you.
Hey, Dr. Sheriff?
Yeah, thank you. No one likes to be second guessed, and here's Todd smiling, seeing this as an opportunity. And that seems to be the attitude of the district, right? This is great. It's great validation of the work that's being done here. Really proof of the efficiency, proof of the understanding of the job that needs to be done, which is really remarkable, as has been pointed out. And the importance of this, it strengthened the relationship with CARB, didn't weaken it. Increases the confidence that the community can have in the work that we do. The confidence of other districts that look to us to administer programs for them. To the state and federal agencies as we are looking for more funding to do this important work. And also as we're advocating for standards at the state and federal level to help this work get done. So to the staff, thank you. Job well done. And Todd, thank you for smiling and seeing this as an opportunity.
Mr. Robbins.
Just to continue along that theme, congratulations, Todd. Congratulations, Samir and staff. A wonderful, delicate balance that you strike. Love the fact that it's so financially sound. On so many fronts, that's helpful. And let's just continue the work. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is a public hearing. We'll move to public comment.
Are there any public comments in Bakersfield?
No public comment in Bakersfield.
Thank you. Any public comment in Modesto?
There's no public comment in Modesto.
Thank you. We do have one online public comment at this time. Chris McLaughlin.
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'll keep my comments brief, but I will echo the comments that various board members made and just commend the district and staff. I apologize. Chris McLaughlin, California Cotton Ginners and Growers Association, as well as the Western Agricultural Processors Association, but take the opportunity to commend the district and staff on a great report and showing just the amount of money and the ability for staff and the district to be able to allocate it effectively and provide these different programs that are very vital to our operation in the agricultural sector. I know that's a small portion of the overall pie of the money that's being used, but working with district staff for many of our farmers has been a great opportunity, and they all walk away very happy with new equipment and just very pleased with the experience. So overall, congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin.
Are there any members of the public in the Fresno office that would like to comment? Okay.
Okay, we have no further public comment, and I'd like to bring it back to the board for any final words on this project. If not, could we move forward with a vote? Could I have a motion, please?
There's no action is necessary.
No action on this?
It's just
Okay.
receive and file a report.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, we'll move to item number 9, report on the 2022-2023 winter resident wood smoke reduction strategy.
All right. Good morning, members of the board. I'm John Klassen, Director of Air Quality Science and Planning. I'm joined by Jamie Holt, Chief Communications Officer, and we will give you this overview of our last winter season, which was November through February. So as we know, there are a lot of public health impacts from exposure to wood smoke. There's a host of scientific research that links these issues, lung disease issues, lung decrease, lung function issues for children, hypertension, heart disease can lead to cancer or heart failure. And this is key for us because residential wood burning is one of the largest sources of direct PM 2.5 emissions during the winter months. This is a really important part of our overall strategy. In addition to that, these emissions occur in neighborhoods where people are living, people are playing there. During the evenings in the winter season, you can get temperature inversions, which can place a cap like a lid over the bowl of the valley, trapping those emissions in the neighborhoods. So due to these impacts, implementing our residential wood smoke reduction strategy is a really key part of our overall strategy.
We have our wood burning curtailment program, which is a very cost-effective program. We get large reductions in PM 2.5 during the winter season with low implementation costs. And these emissions reductions are happening right where people are living in these neighborhoods. The reductions we've seen through this program over the decades has led to us achieving a number of key air quality milestones. We attained the PM10 standard a number of years ago, which this program contributed towards. We've attained the 24-hour PM 2.5 standard of 65 micrograms just recently, and we're continuing to progress towards attaining the annual standards and the 24-hour standard of 35 micrograms. So looking at this past winter season in 22-23, what did we achieve? Let's look at the air quality here. So we did set a number of new air quality records for the region, which was great to see. We set a new record high number of good air quality index days across the Valley counties, and the air quality index is a metric that EPA has established for judging how good the air is. So we set a high number of good days. We had, again, 0 days exceeding the 65 microgram 24-hour standard, the fourth winter season in a row that's happened, which is great to see. We're not having those peak values anymore. We saw a record low number of days exceeding the more stringent 24-hour standard of 35 micrograms in the month of January and the combined January to February period. So the second half of our winter season was excellent for air quality. Averaging the PM 2.5 concentrations across the Valley's counties, this last winter season, we saw a record low average across the region. And looking specifically at speciation analysis, which I'll cover in a few slides, it's showing that we are continuing to reduce those key components that make up PM 2.5 during the winter season. So this is the fourth winter season that we've had our updated strategy in place. We amended the rule in 2019, a few years ago, where we established the hotspot counties of Madera, Fresno, and Kern. And so they have lower curtailment thresholds on the right-hand side there. You can see at 12 and 35 micrograms. And then the other counties are set at 20 and 65 on the left-hand side. This is combined with public education incentives and program enhancements, as well as other requirements across the Valley. So this table here shows the number of wood burning curtailments or no burn days that we had across the Valley's counties. So if you look at the bottom there, that's the latest season, 2022 to 23, highlighted there in yellow. You can see we still had a high number of curtailment days across the Valley's counties, but comparatively to the past couple of winter seasons, which had very poor dispersion, you can see it was a little bit less than what we've seen in the past couple of winters, but still a high number of days where we curtailed wood burning throughout the Valley's counties. So looking more specifically at the air quality index trends over this period, you can see the different colors here. These are the definitions by EPA of air quality. For good, that's the green color, moderate is yellow, unhealthy for sensitive is orange, and unhealthy or above is red. So, and this progresses over time. So if you look on the left-hand side, over 20 years ago, you see a high number of red days across the Valley's counties, a lot of orange days. And then you look towards the right-hand side, you see those good days continuing to increase, and those orange and red days decreasing dramatically. And looking all the way at the right-hand side at this last winter season, you can see that record high number of good days across the Valley's counties, that green color. And I wanted to point out here too that the combination of our green and yellow days, meaning our air quality met the federal 24-hour standard, about 93% of the days during this winter season across our Valley's counties met that standard. So it's great to see this ongoing progress here. So just a note about the meteorology that we saw during this last winter season. This shows the atmospheric stability per month throughout the Valley during the period. And atmospheric stability, that's bad for dispersion, it's bad for air quality. And that's really a measurement of the temperature difference between the higher elevation and the surface. So a positive number here means the atmosphere is stable. We have a higher temperature above than at the surface, and that can put a cap over the bowl of the Valley. You can see during the month of November, that was a very stable month. That dark blue bar, that was this last winter season. And then the hashed bar, that's the average over the past 5 winter seasons. So November was a very stable month for us. We saw higher concentrations then, but then things shifted as we got later into the winter season. December, January, February were much more dispersive, which helped with our air quality. So another way to look at this, we have continued this analysis into this winter season. We've done this before. The blue bars there, again, represent the atmospheric stability across the Valley. So the higher the blue bar, the higher the stability, meaning the conditions are worse for dispersion, worse for air quality. And the green line there is the average concentration of PM 2.5 across the region. So in general, the more stable the atmosphere is, the higher the concentrations that we're going to see. And the less stable, the better concentration. So I want you to, if you can look all the way on the right-hand side, that's the last winter season. You can see that blue bar there. We had some stability, better than the last couple of winter seasons, but our average concentration was looking pretty good. If you look over on the left-hand side, if you can scope out the season of 2002, 2003 on the left-hand side, the stability there was about the same as what we saw during this winter season, yet the concentrations during that winter season were about double than what we saw this winter season. So looking at this closely, you can really get a feel for how effective our strategy is, that even under similar meteorological conditions now than we've seen in the past, our concentrations are much lower, showing that the work we're doing really is helping. So looking closely now at some speciation work. So as we know, PM 2.5 is complex. It's comprised of a number of species or components that we show here in this chart for Modesto as an example. Speciation analysis is a laboratory analysis where you can break down the overall mass of PM 2.5 into different components to understand what's really driving your overall concentrations. The two major components that drive our PM 2.5 during the winter season are ammonium nitrate and organic carbon. That's the blue and yellow bars there in this example for Modesto. And you can see over time that those two pieces are continuing to decrease through our efforts with our residential wood burning program, through ongoing NOx reductions, through all of our other programs. We're seeing these two components continuing to come down and drive down our overall decrease in concentrations of PM 2.5. And other sites across the valley showed similar trends as this one, as these components have come down. So at this point, I'm going to pass it over to Jamie, who's going to give us an overview of our incentive program and outreach efforts.
Good morning. Thank you for turning up the heat a little bit. I too was getting a little chilly.
Start a fire. No wood burn.
We're not going to do that. So a key component of our overall winter wood smoke reduction program is our grant program, what we now call our fireplace and wood stove changeout program. Some of you might remember this being called our Burn Cleaner program. We've actually transitioned away from that name for a couple of reasons. One, people didn't exactly know what Burn Cleaner was. What does that mean? And two, we kind of just don't want people to think about burning if we can get them away from it. And now we have some options in this grant program where they're not going to be burning at all. During the 2002-2003 winter season, we gave out nearly 2,000 vouchers, over 1,700. Over $6.3 million was awarded, and nearly 94% of that funding was provided for natural gas devices. I'll also say that of that 6%, we are seeing an increase in the number of heat pumps, so electric devices that are now a part of this program. 75% of those vouchers are in those hotspot counties, those counties where the thresholds, the days when you can burn, are fewer. You are less able to burn in those counties, and therefore the grant program is a little more vital in those counties, and we see more people taking part in the grant program in those counties. Since 2009, which seems like it was just yesterday, but it was quite a while ago, we've issued 28,000 vouchers, and this program has funded over $57 million in new devices for individuals. We conduct a lot of outreach with this program. It is one of our key big marquee programs that because it has both a rural component and a grant component, we of course couple that with strong outreach. As you might remember, for those of you who've been on the board for a while, we really in 2019 kind of dismantled the outreach. We got some information from a public opinion survey and really began to slightly change some of our messaging, most primarily to make sure that folks understood the actual measurable, quantifiable health impacts of wood smoke. We warned residents when the pollution was expected to deteriorate significantly, and we do provide steps when they need to take that action to protect their health. We saw some of that at the beginning of the season in November this year. We educate residents on things they can do to reduce emissions that are associated with wood smoke. That includes, of course, upgrading your device, our number one recommendation for folks, going to either a natural gas or an electric heat pump. We do basically three types of advertising. One is paid. Those are the things that you most likely are familiar with. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, but that's the stuff that we're paying, say, a TV station or a radio station for. Earned, that's all the chatter that happens online. We really are trying to leverage social media, as everyone is, to make sure that there's a positive conversation going on those various platforms about our program. And then own media. We have a whole variety of social media accounts. We have a website. We even have an app that will give this information out. So we want to make sure that all three of those things are working in combination to really get us the eyeballs or the ears on our messages. We use bilingual messaging, traditional television, print, cable TV. We do signs, digital signs on websites when you go to certain websites, outdoor billboards in neighborhoods where we know they have older homes and therefore might have a wood burning device. We do a lot of presentations. I will tell you, COVID's over, if you were wondering. It's not I know that some people may disagree with that, but we are invited to so many presentations these days. We are out in the community. We have so many staff that will be out this weekend, and we talk a lot about this program because folks are interested in it. We also do digital advertising and streaming on services like Hulu. We do search engine marketing, which allows us to really target what we're doing online to make sure that it's hitting those people that maybe are interested in a wood stove or heating their home or a gas device or a heat pump, so they understand that we have a program. Lots of outreach, as I mentioned, on our social media. We do press releases throughout the season. We sit down with reporters and meteorologists. Most of our local meteorologists in the Valley actually make this a part of their evening weather forecast, so that's a big help to us. Just some statistics. I'm going to try and go through this quickly. Over 38,000 public inquiries to our 1-800 smog info line, which gives the daily wood burning status on a county by county basis in both English and Spanish. Over 300,000 visits to our webpage where folks can get that information. We got nearly 500 public complaints for suspected wood burning activity, and we reached over 48 million sets of eyeballs or ears through our messaging this year. We really are continuing to enhance this program. It always surprises me when I really think we've been running this program for over 20 years. We're really focused on that health message and having people understand that this is something that's impacting really first and foremost them and their neighbors. And the messaging really is that protect public health and avoid wood burning. And you know what? We're going to give you some tools to do that. These are just some examples of the outreach that we've done, TV commercials, social media posts, billboards, a whole variety. We work with our retailer partners. You'll even see some of our retailer partners who run our grant program or who are key to our grant program. They are often mentioning this program when they're doing outreach. We do active enforcement. It's a key component. We have enforcement on nights and weekends, nearly 4,000 staff hours spent on enforcement activities. We investigate and respond to all public complaints we receive. We don't get out and knock on doors. That's not what we're doing. We actually can drive by and use some of the low light imaging technology that's designed to work at night that allows us to basically take a photo of a chimney and smoke coming out of a chimney. We issued nearly 700 notices of violation for this past season. What that means is you get a $100 penalty. You can actually cut that penalty in half if you go to our smoke school, our super exciting smoke school. And really, our enforcement program increases public awareness, support, and compliance. It is very rare that we have repeat offenders. When we do, those fines, though, do go up. Looking ahead, we are just about to launch in the next several months a new public opinion survey to get more feedback on this program as it continues to evolve. This past winter and looking forward, we're continuing to work with our community organizations to make sure that they have the education that they need regarding the program and access to our grant program. We're really beginning to focus more and more on heat pumps and zero emission technologies. And I will tell you that's not just coming from us. That is coming from a variety of different angles. Folks are seeing that there is a lot of funding available, not just through the district, but from various federal funding sources about how you can put in a heat pump, about how they are, in most cases, more energy efficient and less expensive than maybe your old typical HVAC system. And just so, I didn't know what a heat pump was, just so you know. It's basically an electric HVAC system for your home. So even though it says heat pump, it actually cools your home too. So I don't know exactly the technology behind it, but I'm sure we have people in the room who can go deep on it if you want to.
It runs in reverse for heat.
It runs in reverse for heating, just so you know. And we're also considering further reductions for reducing activity and disabling these fireplaces. We're looking at some of the new research that's out there regarding source apportionment and where our PM 2.5 is actually coming from and what is that wood burning concentration. And of course, we are looking at enhancements to the rule to address some of our PM 2.5 contingency requirements as have been evaluated as part of the 2023 PM 2.5 plan to address the 2012 annual PM 2.5 standard. With that, I have a real quick commercial, and I want to thank, I believe this was Councilmember Bessinger's idea, so we want to thank him in advance. He's going to be surprised. One of our local partners.
I'm Connie Young. I'm a retired registered nurse. I found out about a program through the Air District that would provide several $1,000s if I were to disable my fireplace and switch over to a heat pump. The advantage of a heat pump is that it doesn't burn any fossil fuels to run it, and it's extremely efficient. And this is one real simple thing that we can do to improve our air quality and our quality of life in this valley.
That's part of a campaign that we're slowly rolling out to actually have some of our grantees, we have about 7 that we're planning to do, highlighted in some of our commercials, because we want folks to really understand that our grant programs, they're for them, whatever it might be, whether you want a gas device, electric heat pump, a new lawnmower, a truck, a tractor, any of our grant programs. We're really working at profiling some of our grantees and just normal everyday people in the valley. That's all I have.
Well, thank you, staff, for the wonderful presentation. And I'm going to move forward to our board members to see if we have any comments. Dr. Sherritt?
Can't let such a great program go without some kind of comment. One thing I want to do that I haven't done before is also to acknowledge the spirit of David Lighthall, who some people here remember. I don't know if any board members remember David, but I remember him taking me aside early in my life on this board and saying, you know, this was like out of the Graduate, plastics. But David's message was fireplaces, Dr. Sherriff's fireplaces. And I didn't quite get it at the time, but I thought, okay, David, fine. But absolutely, this is extraordinary. You know, we look at the money, $60 million over 10 years, and the benefit that this has brought. This is an extremely cost-effective program. And again, the co-benefits in terms of really having enhanced relationships with the community. You know, the health benefits are you know, PM 2.5, organic PM 2.5 is really the worst of the worst in terms of health effects, in terms of cardiovascular effects, in terms of cancer risk. And this gets to the heart of it, so to speak. But extraordinary value, great health impacts. It's great to see how the program has evolved over time. The adaptability that the district has shown, that the board has shown, because there was a lot of resistance to hotspots. But that clearly has, again, been an incredible value, getting us much more bang for the buck in terms of reductions meeting the standards that we have to meet. I love the increasing emphasis on, helping people understand the importance of how this relates to health. Absolutely. And yeah, really look forward to more tying, I'll look at the website. The website does it. There's the opening website for the district. It was there. But it's got the air quality report, but right next to it is what the public can do. It's got the heat pumps and the change out in the fireplaces. And I think we need to think more and more whenever anybody out there's an air quality, it's tied to one thing people can do. And there are a whole variety of things. So that message will keep changing. But as people look to that air quality message over and over, we need to be looking at here's what you can do. Here's what you can do. Because no matter how good it is, there's room for improvement. So thank you for great work.
Thank you. Mr. Bessinger.
That was a great commercial, and it was nice to see Connie, even though we only hear from her now. Hopefully we'll see her again here at the district. That's all.
Thank you. Dr. Pacheco-Warner?
Yeah, I love seeing the residents and these commercials. Tired of seeing my mug on there. Just kidding. But I do, I just ditto everybody. And also, just please feel free to reach out if I could be of any help on the survey piece. I did want to ask if there were any thoughts or plans around doing more qualitative type work, like a focus group to try to understand what is people's baseline knowledge about heat pumps and, and sort of what are their hesitations? Because I feel I personally, I have no idea where people are in that. And yeah.
Well, first of all, wanted to recognize Dr. Pacheco-Warner for being a huge help the last couple of years and helping us enhance the messaging, the outreach. It's been tremendous, and definitely take you up on the offer on thinking about the survey. When we've talked to the board about the survey, we've kind of expanded the way that we talk about the survey. We've actually included, and the board's been interested in seeing, not just a typical maybe, phone survey. There's obviously online pieces, but also actually having some kind of a focus group component to it. So as we scope it out and as we come back to the board to actually lay out that strategy, it's something that the staff have definitely been thinking about and are interested in seeing if there's other creative ways that we can get a better feel for how residents feel about different aspects of what's going on, but including specifically, some of the newer opportunities, knowledge, how do the incentive programs and the various tax credits, for example, and how do those fit into influencing perhaps how they may want to consider some of these different things. So it's definitely in our minds, and we'll take you up on any input you can provide to help with that. That is something we'll return to the board with to have a conversation about, how we're going to go about in looking at these different perspectives, how those have changed, and also where the opportunities are.
Yeah, I think it'll also be cool to hear from folks that have used those, the stoves or, mostly the heat pumps, for a while, right? Through the winter and through the summer to see how, they really feel, provide that review for folks out there. That'll be great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I have just one last little side comment. Last year, when we were still kind of in semi-quarantine and this report was given, I recall board member Sheklin and myself, she held up her remote control to her gas fireplace, and I turned my screen off and ran and got mine, and we had the same remote control. So I put mine in because I heard that the state was going to come down with some laws about, terminating wood burning in your fireplace, and I put mine in 2000. I probably should have waited until 2009, and I could have gotten some incentive money. But for me, it was a matter of not just burning clean, but I didn't like bringing wood in my house with bugs and all that stuff and have to clean up all the mess afterwards. So it was a twofold blessing for me. But thank you to the staff for the report, and We'll move on to item number 10.
To the chair, I also wanted to make note that Supervisor Rickman has also joined the meeting.
Thank you.
They finally showed up.
I did it after 2009.
Okay, item number 10, approve new Valley-wide clean air room residential air filtration program for Valley community.
Well, good morning, Madam Chair and members of the board. My name is Brian Dodds. I'm a program manager here in our Grants and Incentives Department. And it's my pleasure to be here this morning to seek your board's approval for a Valley-wide clean air rooms program. During periods of wildfire smoke impacts, the district has encouraged residents to utilize air filtration devices to create clean air rooms, which help ensure safe indoor air quality. Last year, your board authorized the launch of a clean air rooms pilot program, which supported the deployment of residential air filtration devices throughout the valley. This program provides free, off-the-shelf residential air filtration devices to valley residents living in disadvantaged communities. In collaboration with local organizations to assist in program outreach, the $250,000 pilot program resulted in over 1,200 devices being distributed to vulnerable populations throughout the valley. Based on the success of the pilot program, along with the recent approval of $3 million in AB 617 funding for clean air room programs in 617 communities of South Central Fresno, Stockton, and Shafter, your board has expressed interest in expanding the program across the valley. In a well-sealed indoor environment, HEPA filter devices can reduce particulate matter emissions or particulate matter exposure by more than 90%. CARB maintains a list of HEPA devices that are approved for sale within the state, and these devices can range in price depending on the size of the room and capacity of the device. And the district again encourages their use during periods of wildfire smoke impacts. With today's item, the district is proposing to implement a valley-wide clean air rooms program to provide residential air filtration devices to valley residents in disadvantaged communities. The district intends to partner with local businesses and organizations to distribute air filtration devices to residents of low income and disadvantaged communities, though free of charge. There's no cost to the residents for these devices. The district is proposing to utilize up to $1 million in available mitigation funds for this program, and eligible participants will include valley residents residing in disadvantaged communities as identified through Cal EnviroScreen, the EPA, EJ Screen, or other approved tools as available. Residents need to provide proof of residency in order to participate. This typically is a utility bill or some other similar document which matches the name of the applicant to the address listed. District staff proposes to allocate available funding to each county based on population, with applications processed on a first-come, first-served basis. Depending on program demand, funds may be shifted from counties with insufficient demand if needed. Eligible costs will include a CARB-certified HEPA filter and one additional filter element for each eligible participant. And we'll work with a program partner to ship these devices to program participants. Devices are shipped directly to their home or mailing address as designated by the participant. We anticipate that each unit, along with the additional filter, will cost between $150 and $300. So we should be able to provide between 3,300 and 6,600 devices through this program. Approval of today's item will authorize the executive director to enter into agreements with vendors, retail partners, or other subcontractors to launch the Clean Air Rooms program throughout the valley. We'll also partner with local organizations to outreach to eligible applicants in disadvantaged communities, and we'll continue to seek out additional state and federal funding opportunities in order to extend the reach of the program. The recommendations for today's item to approve the Clean Air Rooms program are here before you, and that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dobbs. Do we have any questions from the board? That's great. Good present, Dr. Sheriff.
Thank you. Yeah, clear, this is great. There's interest in it. There's clearly a need for it. Again, the health impacts, so important. I guess a couple of questions I have is well, one, as we talked with the wood smoke, do we have any messaging that goes along with this? Other things people can do. They're taking advantage of the program. Are there other things that they can do? What can they do to protect themselves? What can they do to contribute to cleaner air? And I was just looking at the district website. Wish I'd looked earlier on this, but again, well, this is good for everybody. Now, we don't have the funding to fund this for everybody, and we're looking to help the most disadvantaged communities. How do we promote this for everybody? Educate people that, well, this technology is available. CARB, and we think the technology is good enough that it's worth people investing in for their health. And so, how do we promote that for the public? I mean, it sounds like we should be promoting it for the public if we're doing this.
That's a great set of questions and ideas, Dr. Sheriffs. And I think two kind of responses to that. One is we absolutely do promote these as part of our wildfire response and other kind of related outreach. We've got a list of different things that you can do to protect yourself. One of the things that you could do is establishing a clean air room, using these types of filters. So it's certainly embedded into the outreach that we do. But the second point, though, which I think is a great idea, is how do we maximize that outreach through these participants as well? Can we come up with a way for there to be more material or other forms of providing that level of education in terms of what role this may play, and also just other opportunities that they may also have. Everything from landscaping equipment to vehicle. I mean, it's just another great opportunity to get those types of opportunities out there to the residents. I think it's definitely an idea that we'll follow through with, and then these filtration systems also have other benefits as well. So we've already been talking to other some of the local partners as to how these devices help with other health related issues and mitigation. So, for example, there's asthma management programs that also encourage the use of these, and these can play a significant role in dealing with issues that vulnerable populations may have. So those conversations are happening, they're ongoing. We want to leverage those partnerships and see if there's ways that we can maximize it as a part of our effort as well.
Yeah, and I just have to tell a story. This is a great opportunity to help people think about their local environment and things they may be doing. I will never forget making a house call once. Not once, I made lots of house calls, but a house call that I made because a patient was complaining of an exacerbation of a worsening of their asthma condition. When I knocked on the front door, I knew what had caused the problem. They had a wood fireplace. They hadn't made the connection. So anyway, it's a great opportunity to educate people to what's going on locally that they can impact as well.
Thank you. Any other board comments? All right, and I believe this is a public hearing, and we will move forward with public comment.
Thank you. Are there any public comments in Bakersfield?
No public comment in Bakersfield.
Thank you. Are there any public comments in Modesto?
No public comment in Modesto.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public in Fresno that would like to comment?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sandra Uribe, and I'm a policy advocate for Leadership Council and Justice and Accountability for Madera County. And I'm here with residents of Lavina. And the residents of Lavina have fought relentlessly for the betterment of their communities and communities throughout the Central Valley. And I applaud all their efforts. And among these efforts have also been applying for programs such as AB 617, and which they have been denied. So it's one of the reasons why I want to emphasize how useful these funds would be. And I don't think that their efforts should be in vain. Many of the residents' homes here are only inches away from almond orchards and face firsthand all the negative externalities from this, including pesticide usage and dust. And I know how much of a benefit the residential air filtration units would provide for them. And from my understanding, the funds were used super quickly in the 2022 pilot program. And I hope that this serves like a way to just highlight how beneficial this program would be. And now I'll pass it over along to the residents here and I'll let them introduce themselves. And either I could translate or or somebody else could translate. And just wanted to say thank you for letting us be here and provide public comment. It's been great to see all the great news being shared throughout the room, and we hope it keeps going.
Madam Chair, if I could make a suggestion, just given the where we are on the agenda, and I would just make sure that there's enough time, given that it's going to be interpretation going on, within that 3 minutes. But if there's extra time needed to finish the point, if you could just allow for that extension, but just based on whatever time is needed to go back and forth. So if you could allow for that, that'd be my suggestion.
Buenos días, soy la señora Rosa Casillas Gutiérrez, vengo de La Vina, es Condado de Madera. Yo he tenido muchos problemas con las alergias, casi me muero porque no puedo respirar, mi pecho se me ataca feo, el respiro es profundo, pero yo no puedo respirar profundo. Yo tengo problemas con mi estómago porque cuando no respiro profundo se me va inflamando mi estómago, se me pone duro, he caído al hospital de emergencia, mis ojos bien llorosos, dolor de cabeza, me siento mareada todos los días, desde febrero hasta mayo se terminan mis alergias, he ido al doctor para que me pongan la vacuna para las alergias, me ayuda un poco, pero estoy tomando pastillas después de la vacuna. Mi hijo también se fue de emergencia al hospital porque él no podía respirar, se le llenaba su flema aquí en la nariz, con la garganta, cuando respiraba se le venía como sangre, se le venía sangre y se fue al hospital, le dieron que tenía congestión en la nariz por las mismas alergias que están pegando para allá. Hay muchos files alrededor de ahí, andan las avionetas sprayando, andan los tractores sprayando, cuando va uno manejando en las carreteras, no apagan la máquina del tractor, están sprayando y va uno pasando, vuela el agua del químico para los carros, a veces tiene uno que cerrar las puertas de las ventanas de los carros para que no vuele con uno que va manejando por las carreteras.
Okay, good morning. My name is Rosa Casillas Gutierrez. I'm from Lavinia in Madera County. And I just wanted to state that I have lots of problems with allergies. There are days where I can't breathe. And if I do breathe deeply, my stomach tends to start becoming swollen, right? Because I'm taking those full deep breaths in. And so then I've had to go to the emergency room because I also have lots of dizziness, just lots of ailments that she described as well. And she goes, this goes on from February through May every single year. I've gone to the doctor, I've gotten allergy shots, but in addition to that, my son has also had problems. He's also had to go to the ER, again, also facing the same issues that I have. There are lots of fields around my area. We also get lots of sprays. The airplanes are spraying. We also have tractors that are spraying, and that we also have to close our windows from our vehicles and our homes because we get the drift from those pesticides that are being sprayed. And then those are all her comments, and I kind of just summarized all of her stuff. Okay, gracias.
Mi nombre es Silvia Moreno. Sí, mi nombre es Silvia Moreno y yo estoy aquí para comentar de las alergias. por los químicas pues que tiran ahí, ¿verdad? Yo ahorita tengo una hija que tiene tos, ajá, y yo pienso que es de lo mismo, pues de las químicas pues que tiran ahí. Y como vivimos pues ahí cerquitas de los files, ahí alrededor. Ujú.
Eso?
Sí.
Okay, gracias. Okay, hi, my name is Sylvia Moreno. I'm also from Lavinia. And I'm just here to comment to say that, you know, we are also facing that in my area. And my daughter also has a cough. And you're just concerned because we do live in this neighborhood and experiencing the same issues.
Buenos días. Mi nombre es la señora Berta García, del condado, condado de Madera de Lavina. Y tenemos muchos problemas. Ahorita yo ya tengo 3 semanas con el dolor en el pecho, que me sacan como infección en el pecho de los pulmones por las alergias y los químicos que están echando atrás de mi casa. Atrás de mi casa no tiene ni 3 pies del fil. Está pegada a mi casa con el fil y hemos tenido muchos problemas. Hay muchas personas allí en la comunidad de Lavina que se han muerto en estos años por los químicos que están echando del cáncer. Se están enfermando del cáncer y tenemos muchos problemas allí desde ya muchos años con las alergias, con el cáncer, con todo eso. Y ahorita yo tengo ya 3 semanas que no me puedo aliviar. Ya he ido 3 veces al hospital por lo mismo del dolor en el pecho y me dicen que sí, que son puro de los químicos que están echando atrás de mi casa, porque allí andan los tractores atrás de mi casa sprayando. Yo no puedo abrir mis ventanas de mi casa, mis puertas, porque es un olor muy fuerte de los químicos. Y yo tengo mi muchacho que también está padeciendo de asma, mi niño, mi nietecito y mi esposo también ahorita están enfermos por lo mismo, y yo les pediría por favor que si nos pueden ayudar para saber, porque ahorita todo el estado de California hay muchas alergias y los químicos que están afectando a todo California. Y es lo que queremos nosotros, saber si nos pueden ayudar para resolver esos problemas con el aire, para ver si nos pueden poner como detectores para el aire, para que nos ayude a cuando menos a limpiar el aire que está muy contaminado en todo California. Y de los filtros, a ver si nos pueden poner para que nos ayuden en esta comunidad de Lavina, porque tenemos muchas necesidades allí, muchos problemas en el condado de allí de Lavina. Y eso es lo que les pedimos, por favor, que si nos pueden poner los detectores para el aire, y les pediría, por favor, a ver si nos oyen y nos ayudan para ponerlos. Muchas gracias,
¿Es una manera Berta?
Sí.
Okay. Okay, good morning. My name is Berta Garcia. I'm from Madera County in the community of Lavinia. She's mentioned that 3 weeks been in the hospital due to chest tightness, and every single time that she goes there, they basically just tell her that it is a lung inflammation and it's probably just due to the chemicals that are in her area. She mentioned that she lives 3 feet, not even 3 feet from her back door is the field. And so with that, you know, many in her community, in addition to her, you know, facing a lot of these issues, have all, there's many from her community who have either died or have had issues, health issues. Many have died from cancer, or they have lots of prevalence of cancer or asthma as well. And she mentioned again that she has been to the hospital 3 times. In the last couple of, it just seems like within the last couple of months, or maybe in the last month, she's had to be taken to the hospital due to that. Again, you know, she can't even open her window or her doors because of all of the pesticides and the chemicals that are being sprayed in her area, and because of the dust. Her son, grandson, and husband also kind of face these same issues. And she is urging the district to be able to help them with either installation of air monitoring equipment around their neighborhood to kind of see what is happening. But she's also urging you all to help them get purification, residential purification programs or systems into their homes so that they can actually live or breathe clean air while they're in their homes. And that she's asking all of you to please help them to be able to get these systems in their homes and communities. Sorry.
Buenos días, mi nombre es Ascensión Aguayo. Yo también vengo de la comunidad de La Vina, de este condado de Madera. Tengo 30 años viviendo allí y como dice la vecina, pues nuestras casas tenemos huertas alrededor de las casas y pues siempre el aire está muy contaminado. Como dijo ella, ya han muerto vecinos de cáncer y pues por eso queremos saber si nos escuchan y pueden hacer algo para ayudarnos a que se reduzca esa contaminación del aire. Muchas gracias.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Ascensión Aguayo from Lavinia community as well. I have lived 30 years in that neighborhood, and as my neighbor has already mentioned, our air is very polluted in that community, and we have had many neighbors who have died from cancer. So we are urging you again to help us in any way that you can. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Do we have any other further public comments?
We do have an online public commenter, Cynthia Pinto Cabrera.
Cynthia, are you there?
She is been promoted to panelist. Ms. Pinto Cabrera, can you hear us? I'm not sure if she's accepted the promoting to panelist. Ms. Pinto Cabrera, go ahead. Seems like her audio is not on her Zoom. Ms. Pinto Cabrera?
Can we move forward? I think we should move forward. Okay, are there any other online comments?
No other online commenters.
Okay, thank you. Then I'll bring it back to the board. Any further final comments?
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair. I just wanted to say a couple of comments to our speakers today. Muchas gracias por venir. Muchas gracias por tomar ese viaje y decir estas palabras. Yo sé que no es fácil decir lo que ustedes viven día con día y pues lo que están viendo en sus vecinos, en sus niños, en sus nietos. Yo sé que el distrito y también personalmente nos hemos comprometido de tratar de ayudarlos de diferentes maneras y yo personalmente también le voy a dar seguimiento a lo que ustedes pidieron hoy. Muchas gracias. And just saying thank you for their comments. And I know it's not easy sharing the struggles that you're dealing with and the struggles that your families are dealing with. And I know the district has committed to helping the community, and I myself am going to follow up with the district as well, personally, to see how we can further help. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Bessinger.
I have a question. I'm assuming that we can't help Lavinia specifically with this funding because it's not a 617 community, is that correct?
No, this funding would be available. This is valley-wide funding, so it's available to any resident in a disadvantaged community. And in fact, just want to take this opportunity to also mention that we have been meeting with community members, with organizations that are working in Lavinia and other communities to make sure that they're also helping us get the word out and providing that access to the residents in the community. So that conversation has already been happening, and definitely appreciate Leadership Council and others that have been working on this issue. So it would be available, and these residents, I strongly encourage them to participate and to access these funds. Appreciate them also, as Dr. Pacheco-Warner mentioned, taking the time to be here and talk about how important this program can be in helping them with various concerns that they have.
Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no further board comments, I'd like to request a motion to approve.
I would move approval.
We have a motion.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Okay. Mr. Bessinger,
Yes.
Mr. Couch,
Yes.
Ms. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Mendez,
Yes.
Dr. Pacheco-Warner,
Yes.
Mr. Pereira,
Aye.
Mr. Rickman,
Yes.
Mr. Robinson,
Yes.
Dr. Sheriff,
Yes.
Ms. Schicklin.
Aye.
Through the chair, motion passes.
Thank you. We'll move on to item 11, approve a project plan for implementation of car share program within the Shafter AB 617 community.
Good morning again, Madam Chair, members of the board. Todd DeYoung, Director of Grants and Incentives, here to seek your board's approval of a project plan for the implementation of a car share program within the Shafter AB 617 community. So just by way of a brief background, your board's top priority, one of your top priorities, has been providing a space for meaningful community engagement on the district's air quality strategies. This really began back in 2007 when your board adopted the environmental justice strategy. It continued with the creation of the district's Environmental Justice Advisory Group, which has been instrumental in moving a lot of environmental justice related issues and policies forward within the district. And it continues today with the community level efforts, including the AB 617 Community Air Protection Program. The district has invested in additional community-focused resources to support these local engagement efforts and really to uplift communities. With these board-established priorities, the district is committed to helping these communities that are disproportionately impacted by economic and environmental inequities to forge these new partnerships and identify and leverage clean air opportunities. This slide is really a collage of some of the efforts that the district has undertaken to really get into the Valley communities and to make those partnerships. There's some pictures of our lawnmower replacement program, some of our tune-in, tune-up programs where folks can get free smog checks for their vehicles. The bottom right-hand picture is part of our AB 617 process that we go through and really engaging directly with the residents and listening to what's important for them in their communities. So as a reminder, through the AB 617 Community Air Protection Program, 4 communities have thus far been selected by CARB, promoted by the district, to receive those dedicated resources under the AB 617 program. And those 4 are South Central Fresno, Shafter, Stockton, and then most recently the Arvin-Lamont community. The Shafter community is the focus of the project plan that we're talking about this morning with your board. And just by way of, again, just a little bit of a background on the AB 617 funding process, the Community Air Protection Program provides dedicated funding for incentive-based measures under AB 617 for these communities. There's a set of CAP guidelines, the 2019 CAP guidelines that we're working under. These guidelines are prescriptive in how we use the CAP funds. They generally follow some of the more established incentive programs in the state, most likely the Carl Moyer program. Measures that are within community-approved CERPs or community emission reduction programs that are not included within those guidelines have to go through a separate process for approval, and that's what we're doing with this project today. The car share program for Shafter that we're proposed, it's in the SERP for Shafter, but it wasn't in the pre-approved guidelines for CARB, so we have to take it through an approval process with CARB. It has been approved by CARB, and so the next step in that process is to take it before your board for approval, and then we go to the implementation phase. So some details on the actual car share program in Shafter. In the approved SERP, the Community Emission Reduction Program, $500,000 was identified for a car share program within the Shafter AB 617 community. Why is this important? Obviously, mobile sources make up a majority of the ozone and PM 2.5 forming NOx and diesel particulates in the valley. Mobile sources are not under the direct authority of the district. They're primarily under the state and federal jurisdiction. And so we rely on those voluntary incentive programs to reduce emissions in those mobile source areas. With limited public transportation options, driving is more prevalent in the valley. And so car share programs aim to get people out of their vehicles and into more efficient and clean air modes of transportation. So over the last several months, the Shafter Community Steering Committee, or CSC, as it's shown on the slide there, has worked closely with the district, the city of Shafter, and Kern County to identify and prioritize the proposed car share program within the Shafter AB 617 community. A lot of valley communities, Shafter being included, often lack the infrastructure to support these cleaner vehicles and the transportation needs of these communities. And the Shafter community boundary does have a high percentage of low income and underrepresented residents. So this new car sharing program will enable these residents to obtain affordable access to zero and near zero emission vehicles without the burden of ownership. So what is a car share program? What are the general elements? It's essentially to provide residents with access to these zero and near zero emission automobiles. These vehicles are domiciled within the community. They're parked within the community. That's where they reside. They'll have access to EV chargers that are located within the community that are all part of this program. They'll have access to vehicle reservations and online services through a phone application, as well as telephone contact for those folks who don't utilize smartphone technology. It allows residents to reserve these vehicles, take these vehicles for a very nominal fee, to go grocery shopping, run errands, attend medical appointments in the surrounding area. Those things that maybe traditional transit doesn't serve them well enough for. Maybe the transit routes are inconvenient for some of these stops, and it allows more flexibility for the residents to get to where they need to go. It also does another important thing. It introduces those residents to the benefits of zero and near zero emission technology. A lot of folks don't have the opportunity to sit in these vehicles, to drive these vehicles, to get comfortable with the technology. And this addresses a lot of those common misconceptions about advanced technology vehicles, things like range anxiety. Are they going to run out of charge? The reliability and the performance of these vehicles. So the more we can get familiar with these types of vehicles, the more that they'll be open to these types of technologies in the future. The staff that would be administering this car share program would be available to assist residents with reservations and questions and concerns that they have about vehicles and registrations and scheduling and all of those things. There will be dedicated staff available to assist those residents. The funding in the SERP is enough. We're hoping to support a program operation for up to 3 years. So it's a 3-year program at this point. The car share program will be a partnership between the district and the city, or the city and the selected grantee. It'll be modeled after an existing program, an existing statewide program. So we're not reinventing the wheel in terms of how we're going to be administering this and eligible costs and things like that. The California Clean Mobility Options Program is up and running, and so we're going to model it after that so that there's an established process that we're working through. The grantee for the project will be selected through an open competitive solicitation process. We'll open it up an RFP. And then we'll go through that solicitation process. And again, we'll use established methodology to rank the projects and calculate the emission reductions for each potential project. And then after that solicitation period, we would bring those back to the Community Steering Committee to discuss the results of the solicitation. Any applicants would be required to submit a very detailed project implementation plan on how they'd run the program within the community, the data that would be collected on usage and emission reductions. It would have to detail an outreach plan to really engage the community to make sure they understand the benefits of the program and what's available to them. And then a plan to evaluate the potential vehicles and riders, how you sign up to become either a driver or a rider for the program. So all of those details would be included in that project implementation plan. We've come up with a scoring criteria, the general scoring criteria. You can see here, I'm not going to go through each one, but you can see this is how we're going to rank those proposals that come in through this process here. And so next steps, approval of today's item would authorize the district to release an RFP to solicit those proposals. We'll work closely with the Community Steering Committee to provide regular updates on the program status. And then once a grantee is selected, we'll work closely with the car share partner, the Community Steering Committee in Shafter, and then other stakeholder agencies to begin that targeted outreach to the community residents and get this program off the ground. So this last slide is just the recommendations. They're in your packet today. And with that, I would be happy to take any questions or comments.
Okay, thank you, Todd. Do we have any questions?
I got one. Well,
Okay,
didn't pull my button fast enough.
Mr. Bessinger.
Todd, I have a question. What generally, what grantees have used this in previously with other programs?
There are several rideshare agencies out there that operate within California and more specifically within the Valley. There are specific companies that do this. I mean, this is their wheelhouse.
Okay, so we're not reinventing the wheel.
No, absolutely not. And we've already been contacted by multiple potential applicants, and so that a lot of them are already aware of the upcoming opportunity.
I know that a lot of prisons use ride shares.
Mm-hmm.
Would this be something that employees, people living in Shafter who are, let's say, working at a prison, Delano, could they do that? Or is that kind of not our thought for this use?
It's maybe a little bit out of kind of what we were thinking. This is more for residents using these vehicles for one-off trips to, you got a doctor's appointment, or if you need to go into Bakersfield to go grocery shopping, or, more of those sort of day-to-day operations. I don't think it would preclude that necessarily, but this wasn't intended to be a regular route, back and forth, say, to a prison, in my mind. It's more of kind of those one-off flexible trips that folks need to take.
That would certainly be more of a public service. Thank you.
Yeah.
Dr. Pacheco-Warner?
Yeah, thanks. Todd, I shared some comments with Samir, but one of the things that from hearing from one of those programs, one of the things that they were concerned about is like the timeline of when they get the money, to be able to purchase the vehicles, especially some of the smaller startups. Mm-hmm. And being able to do this effectively. So I just wanted to kind of elevate that. I do think that if not within this program, with this particular RFP, maybe in future ones, I do think that there should be a scoring criteria of experience in rural communities, just because I do feel like that is a particular space that's very different, and that we want to make sure that people really know what they're doing in that space. So thank you.
No, that's a great addition, and certainly our scoring criteria was not set in stone, so it's absolutely, that's something we could include.
Mr. Mendez.
Yeah, Mr. Bessinger basically asked the questions I was going to ask, but now going back to do they have to be an established rideshare company in order to apply?
That would be one of the scoring criteria. We would look for that experience. So that would be that would elevate them, obviously.
Right, because if you had somebody that never did it, 6 months from now, after you got the cars, you go, where the hell's the cars?
Correct. Yeah. We would be looking for those established
Right.
rideshare agents.
And this is probably, if you can do it right, it's cheaper than running public transit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Dr. Scher?
The thinness of this document belies the 617 process, and I just again have to point out that the district has engaged in that challenge, and it has not been simple. But again, coming up with these kinds of projects, good work. The project itself, it highlights the co-benefits of what happens with when we impact air quality, criteria pollutants, greenhouse gas emissions, the co-benefits there that are so important. I guess my question, and probably really thinking for the future, but yeah, the funding for this is time limited. This is a 3-year project, and there clearly will be some terrific benefits to the community and to air quality in the short term. And hopefully some of those, we talked about the people becoming more familiar with the technology and easing the adoption potentially. But maybe for the future thinking, or how do we think about how to make these kinds of more sustainable? Funding runs out. Funding can't be depended on beyond this limited amount of time, but it's a great project and great benefits. And whether there's a way to prioritize, I'm just looking at the criteria for this one. There's going to be a calculation of project level emission reductions. Well, if somebody's got a plan that can make this go another year, even if there isn't funding for it, that would certainly be important. And I think about the Carnegie libraries. Boy, what that achieves in this country in terms of education for communities, tremendous impact on the economy. Well, Carnegie would give you money for a library, a lot of money for the capital, but you had to have a plan to make this sustainable in your community. You had to have a plan the way the community was going to support this in the future ongoing. And if you had that, great, here's the money. But otherwise, well, come up with your plan and come back. So thinking about how we can work with that.
That's a great comment. I mean, absolutely. What I would envision would be ongoing discussion, especially as the program takes off and based on performance and based on the lessons learned, ongoing conversations with the city, with the COG and others. What I hope that what I heard from Supervisor Mendez, in looking at a program like this from a cost effectiveness perspective and the level of service that it may be able to provide, my hope would be that there's enough value that comes out of the program that it becomes, in that case, maybe a suite of things that can be supported. A lot of that I think we'll just have to see as it plays out. But I would imagine if there was strong community support and the metrics to justify, from whatever angle you look at it in terms of cost effectiveness, the level of benefit that the program provides, that there would be conversations as the life of the program plays out to look at how can that be continued, especially if that value is there. So absolutely something that we're thinking about and something I'm sure the community will be interested in having that ongoing discussion as the project plays out over time.
And Mr. Robinson?
Just a quick question. So Todd, you made mention of one-offs and a sampling for comfort, et cetera. Would that also involve commuters at all or not at this phase?
Again, I think as we've been working with the steering committee and the residents of Shafter, the program was really more envisioned to be sort of, helping them run errands, helping them get places that they otherwise wouldn't be able to get to. There are other opportunities for more like fixed route car sharing, van pooling opportunities and things like that. But the community's goal for this program was to really assist those residents who necessarily didn't have access to transit or that transit didn't work for them, to really help them to do their daily activities, more so than, kind of these fixed commuting routes.
So I'll be the last question here on the board. In your last statement about helping residents who don't have public transit near them, and I would assume that these vehicles are going to have some sort of stationary place that they're going to be because there needs to be a charging station there to charge them up. How has the 617 district thought about how those residents are going to get to that car?
Yeah, it's a combination of things. So it's the way that we're envisioning this to operate is you can either reserve the vehicle yourself, and if you can get down to where the vehicles are located, and we want to make sure that they're centrally located to where the highest number of residents can easily access these vehicles. The second way that these things operate are you've got a driver, somebody who's paid a nominal amount to operate the vehicle, and then they would go and actually pick up the resident. So if they were a little bit, further away, the driver of that vehicle could then go pick them up, drive them to their appointment or to shopping or whatever, and then drive them back. They would be paid a nominal amount for that, but we want to make sure that all of the residents of the 617 community have access to those vehicles.
So that fee payment, is that provided by the 617 program?
Correct.
So it's not like a taxi fee to the
No,
to the
it's all
resident?
provided by the grant.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a public hearing, and I'd like to move forward to see if we have any public comments.
Thank you. Are there any public comments in Bakersfield?
No public comment in Bakersfield.
Thank you. Any public comments in Modesto?
There's no public comment in Modesto.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public in Fresno office that would like to comment? Seeing none, we do have one online commenter, Kevin Hamilton. I think some delays on Zoom getting these commenters. He left the meeting. Kevin left the meeting.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move forward, and I'll bring it back to the board for any final comments. And if no final comments, can I have a motion? I have a motion to approve. Do I have a second? We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bessinger?
Yes.
Mr. Couch?
He's got up.
Okay. Ms. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Mendez? Dr. Pacheco Warner?
Yes.
Mr. Pereira?
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Rickman?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Dr. Sheriff?
Yes.
Ms. Schicklien?
Aye.
Back to Mr. Couch.
Sorry about that. Yes.
Thank you. Through the chair, motion passes.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item 12, a verbal update on attainment planning efforts for federal PM 2.5 standards.
Good morning, Madam Vice Chair and your board. My name is Emily Nealand, and I'm the program manager of our air quality planning team. And I'm here today to provide you with an update on our attainment planning efforts and contingency measures as well. So as you know, your board has adopted numerous attainment plans and air quality control strategies to address federal ambient air quality standards. And through this effort, we've reduced stationary source ozone and PM 2.5 forming NOx emissions by over 90% through hundreds of regulatory actions. Additionally, the California Air Resources Board at the state level has adopted numerous mobile source emissions controls, and these combined efforts represent the nation's toughest emissions control program. Additionally, as you've heard a lot about today, we operate really strong incentive programs with over $5 billion in public and private investment. And through these efforts, the Valley continues to make major improvements with respect to air quality. So specifically for PM 2.5, most recently your board adopted the 2018 PM 2.5 plan in November of 2018, alongside CARB to address the 1997, 2006, and 2012 PM 2.5 standards. This plan included a comprehensive attainment plan, and the vast majority of the district's emission reduction commitments have been achieved through enhanced regulations, a number of which have been brought to your board in recent years and have already been contributing to air quality improvements here in the Valley. Additionally, we also adopted in October of 2021 and submitted to EPA a plan revision to address the 1997 annual PM 2.5 standard. EPA has approved a number of key portions of this plan, but there's still some significant pending actions that remain. Specifically for the 1997 annual PM 2.5 standard, as I just mentioned, we submitted a SIP revision to EPA in October of 2021, and we're still awaiting EPA's action. For the 2012 PM 2.5 standard, the district and CARB are working on an updated plan in response to EPA's reversal on their prior proposed approval. And lastly, for contingency measures for PM 2.5 standards, which we'll talk about here in a little bit more detail, the district and CARB are currently working to develop an updated contingency SIP package to address EPA's revolving requirements. And then, as you know, EPA disapproval or inaction can result in a number of devastating consequences to the Valley, including sanctions clocks, which can impact our permitting, as well as contribute to federal highway sanctions. And specifically, we have clocks running right now for contingency and other plan elements with 18 and 24-month timeframes attached to those. EPA is obligated under a recently signed consent decree to approve a contingency submission or develop a proposed federal implementation plan, or FIP, by July 31st of this year. So with that, the district and CARB are continuing to offer our support to EPA in evaluating the high level of stringency of our programs, and that there's a limited number of opportunities for contingency measures here in the Valley. So a little bit more on contingency measures. They are Clean Air Act requirements, and they're measures that are to be adopted and held in reserve to be automatically triggered upon certain scenarios, such as EPA finding that the Valley failed to attain one of the PM 2.5 standards. And these requirements are really difficult to satisfy for regions such as the Valley that have mature air quality programs, and we are already implementing the most stringent measures under the Clean Air Act. So the district and CARB are required to submit a revised contingency package for the PM 2.5 standards in response to recent court rulings on EPA actions and subsequent EPA disapprovals. They did release their long-awaited draft contingency guidance in March, so the district has been diligently reviewing that as we've been developing our package, and we have put together a proposed contingency submission for your board's consideration at the May public hearing that includes updated analysis and district measures, as well as an infeasibility analysis for CARB at the state level, and they will not be proposing any measures based on that infeasibility at this time. We also held multiple public workshops through this process, specifically in March and April, and we did post our package for 30-day public review on April 18th, so just this last Tuesday. Contingency measures are challenging for a number of reasons. Specifically, the Valley is designated as non-attainment under multiple national ambient air quality standards. So not only do we have to identify one measure, we have to identify measures for all of the standards that we're non-attainment for. Additionally, we're already implementing the most stringent measures feasible. So there's really a scarcity of measures available for us to hold back, definitely considering our non-attainment challenges. Contingency measures also need to achieve a high amount of emission reductions, which is infeasible. As I mentioned, it's already difficult enough to identify a measure, but then that measure also has to achieve a really high amount of emission reductions. They also have to be implemented automatically, which is infeasible for most control technologies under our rules, which take time and planning to install. And lastly, there's a lack of feasible measures that fit the constraints of contingency. So on the topic of EPA's draft contingency guidance, they did release that on March 17th, and it included a number of main components and considerations. The first is for the amount of emission reductions needed for contingency measures. So they put forward a draft updated approach that is based on our attainment year emissions inventory, which includes the really extensive control measures that we've recently been adopting. So that does decrease our obligation. And then Additionally, if our measures were to achieve less than those targets, we could demonstrate that there's no technologically or economically feasible opportunities. They've also included some considerations for the timeline in which emission reductions are to be achieved. And so they're allowing potentially for up to 2 years for emission reductions to be achieved following a trigger if we were to provide additional justification. And lastly, just to note that the guidance did not include any obligations for EPA to put their own measures forward. So first, for our contingency measures that we're proposing this upcoming board meeting is residential wood burning. As you know, this rule is the most stringent measure here in the nation, and EPA recently approved it as such. And the rule includes stringent no burn curtailment levels for hotspot and non-hotspot counties. And just a reminder that the hotspot counties are Fresno, Madera, and Kern. The contingency measure would establish a progressively more stringent curtailment level upon EPA approval of the provision and upon issuance of by EPA that the district failed to make progress toward attainment of the standard, failed to meet any quantitative milestone in an attainment plan or submit a quantitative milestone report, and failure to attain the applicable PM 2.5 standard by its attainment date. And the South Coast region, they do include a similar contingency provision in their rule, but notably it is less stringent than our current rule requirements. But EPA did approve it in April of 2022 as meeting contingency requirements for PM 2.5. So here on the slide is our current approach for the contingency measure, which we've included in our proposed package that we published on Tuesday. So just to go over the current requirements, the hotspot counties of Madera, Fresno, and Kern are subject to level 1 and level 2 curtailments of 12 and 35 micrograms per meter cubed. The level 1 is no burning unless registered, and then the level 2 is no burning for all. And then for the non-hotspot counties, they're currently subject to 20 and 65 micrograms per meter cubed for the level 1 and level 2 curtailments. For our contingency measures, upon a first contingency trigger, we would subject the non-hotspot counties to the hotspot county curtailment levels of 12 and 35 for the level 1 and level 2. And then upon a second potential trigger, we would lower the level 1 curtailment level by 1 microgram per meter cubed, so it would drop to 11. An additional area that we looked at was open areas. The rule regulates dust from open areas, which are vacant portions of residential or commercial lots and contiguous parcels that are immediately adjacent to and owned or operated by the same individual or entity. And just to note that this does not apply to agricultural sources. Currently, urban areas greater than half an acre and rural areas greater than 3 acres, if they're disturbing 1,000 square feet or greater, they must ensure soil stability and limit their visible dust emissions to no greater than 20% opacity. We were looking at this category as EPA had suggested it to us to increase the stringency of the applicability for rural areas, despite the fact that there's limited emission reductions associated with that. So included in our package is a commitment that if needed, to ensure approvability of our contingency submission, we may consider amendments to lower the rural acreage threshold. And again, this would be triggered for any of the contingency triggering elements that I previously went over. And again, EPA did approve a less stringent measure in Imperial County back in August of 2019, which did not include the attainment trigger that's required under the Clean Air Act, and there were no quantified emissions benefits, but EPA had still approved it back in 2019. So I know there's a lot of tiny numbers on the slide, but this just kind of outlines the reductions that we're achieving from 4901 and comparing that to the contingency target under the draft guidance. So all of the reductions are provided by the district's contingency measures. There's no mobile source reductions. And then the reductions that we are achieving largely satisfy the reductions needed from sources under our jurisdiction. And we do believe that the remaining balance could be addressed by federal mobile sources. We're also including an infeasibility justification for ourselves and CARB that meet contingency requirements and demonstrate that we have a lack of available opportunities. So the top table outlines the emission reductions target and the reductions comparing to all emission sources. So that's stationary, area, and mobile. And then the bottom table is just comparing to sources under our jurisdiction, which we believe is more equitable. And as you can see on the right-hand column, who are largely fulfilling those requirements. And again, we do believe that federal mobile sources could contribute to fully satisfy these requirements. And with that, as you know, mobile sources make up the majority of emissions, and EPA really needs to be doing their fair share, given the stringency of the district and CARB's regulations. And specifically, there's opportunities for interstate trucks, locomotives, and aircraft. And as always, there's unprecedented funding opportunities that EPA could really prioritize funding for areas such as the Valley, and extreme and serious non-attainment, environmental justice communities, as well as other considerations for affordable housing, energy programs, and other topics. So with that, that concludes my presentation, and just again want to thank you for having me here today.
Thank you, Emily. Is there a second part to this presentation?
No.
Yeah, there's no
He's just
action
here for his
on
support.
this item.
Hold my hand.
Did you want to say a few things, John? No. There's no action on this item. It's just an update.
Did anybody hold it? Not at all.
No, not a bit. Okay, any board comments? Mr. Rickman?
Thank you, Chair. Just real quick, I know last time I mentioned it, just see if there's any updates when you're talking about looking at District Rule 8051. I mentioned last time exception for fire breaks. We hear anything on that? I mean, is that something you think would be acceptable?
Yeah, so we are definitely taking a look at that. That rule is continuing to work its way through the evaluation and the process. So we definitely jotted that down and are going to be taking that into consideration. Ultimately, what's acceptable, it's hard. We can't fully, predict that down the road when it comes to, an approvability, say by EPA. But definitely heard you loud and clear. And I think there's a lot that goes into that question in terms of, even if for fire breaks, what options are available, what's the cost to the resident to exercise those options when you're clearly doing that for safety reasons and other, reasons. Even though we had a rainy year this year, generally a bit in a drought, so one of the typical things that could be done might be watering, say, the field. Do you have availability? And what's the cost? And there's a lot of issues to consider when you're doing something in that case, say, to deal with a safety issue. So definitely hear you loud and clear on that. It's something that we are definitely taking a close look at in the process for that rule.
Thank you, Samir. And my last question to you, Samir, is I know there's been several hearings with our Valley representatives in the federal Congress with the EPA director about some of the EPA requirements, regulations that's imposed on the Valley. Have you heard much of that? How's that going?
This issue, the contingency issue, but also just the larger planning issues are a significant concern to the Valley. The sanctions clocks that were mentioned by Emily earlier, the potential impact of on the permitting system, but also on the highway funding coming to the region are issues of major concern, not only obviously to the board and the staff who are working diligently to put together these updated proposals, even with just a few weeks of time here with the guidance that came out, basically about a month ago now, but also to other elected officials. Congressional delegation is very interested in this and really just looking for ways to make sure that our region doesn't inequitably suffer as a result of very difficult federal requirements that aren't strictly a local issue. There's state mobile sources, federal mobile sources that also play a huge role in looking at this. So there has been a lot of conversation at the federal level regarding what is EPA going to be able to do to make sure that our region doesn't end up in a situation where we're facing these sanctions. So I know that's I think what you're referring to, and we continue to try to educate. We're getting a lot of interest in this from a variety of different stakeholders, but including Valley leaders who would like to see a solution, basically put into place. We do think that with the proposal that we noticed this week that's going to the board here scheduled for May, we think it's an approvable proposal that meets the draft guidance that was published. So we do, and we've been working very closely with Region 9 to understand their questions and are doing our best to provide whatever information they need as they continue their work to review the upcoming, what sounds to us to be a federal implementation plan proposal in the summer. So we've been working very closely with them and CARB to make sure they have the information that they need. But overall, there's still obviously a very large concern around, just given the short timeframes where the guidance is coming out and having these sanctions looming, a lot of concern around, is EPA going to be able to give us that approvable pathway to make sure that we don't get impacted in our region due to issues that are largely outside of our control.
All right, thank you, Samir. And I just want to say thank you to the congressional reps that are fighting for us. We appreciate it, and we see it here in the Valley. So thank you.
Okay,
I'll
thank
yield
you,
my
Dr.
time. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pacheco Warner.
Yeah, thank you. And just thank you to staff. This is just the amount of, I can't imagine the amount of hours by this point that you've put in working with EPA and CARB on this. So just really thank you for putting in those hours and that effort and willing to go there with this this proposed measure. I have a couple of questions. When it comes to this, just so I understand the table that you have, it's on slide 11. The table, the second table on the bottom, the contingency analysis for sources under the jurisdiction. So this is saying that even with our wood burning measure, we would still have a balance of what we need to achieve. Is that correct?
Yeah, and let me know if I'm wrong here, Emily, but I'll answer that first. Yeah, so the remaining balance at the lower table, when it's positive, that means it's a surplus actually of reductions beyond the target. When it's in parentheses, like the middle row, that would be remaining reductions to be achieved. So for the 2006 standard, and that, to answer your question, I think more specifically to that one, where you see that negative 0.43, that would be, additional reductions would be needed to meet that target.
Mm-hmm.
But for the other two standards, actually, with that measure in place, we'd actually be exceeding the required target.
Right. But this is all, but the bottom one is just, it's for our edification that they're going to use the top one to measure our measures, correct?
That we're not sure. I mean, it's still draft guidance. There's a lot of suggestions, going EPA's way. So our argument would be to take the second table into consideration. But you're right. What's currently in the draft guidance would be the top table. That table includes all the emission sources, the state mobile sources, the federal mobile sources. So there's an obligation that you run all those emissions through an equation. The equation tells you what the obligation would be. And then the question then becomes, how do you meet that obligation? There's no federal sources or measures. There's no state measures. So basically, it's the only measures that are being proposed are at the local level to meet the entire obligation. So you're right, though. At this point, it would be that table. Now, but along with those obligations, I want to make sure it's clear, the guidance does allow for this review of different sources and looking at the feasibility of measures. And so it's not that it's necessarily short and that's the end of the story. That's the obligation, but you have to combine that with the rest of the analysis. And that's something that we've included in the document that was posted on Tuesday, and that's going to be before your board, hopefully in May for consideration.
And the justification, yeah. And I think that's really helpful. I think particularly looking forward to future plans, which I hope we are able to navigate that next part. But I do want to just kind of think through, because we don't have it here, and you talked about, barely any reductions. How much closer does adding the fugitive dust rule get us? I mean, are we talking about like 0.0000 or?
It's it's in that scale actually. It's very, very little to unquantifiable. We're still working through that. There's issues. We've been just seeking ways to try to as best quantify those benefits, but through different methodologies that we've used. It's just clear that there's really not going to be much extra reduction from that measure. And I also wanted to note that when you look at the top table on slide number 11, we do even with the federal guidance, and only with our local measures that are being proposed, we do exceed the PM 2.5 balance. And then it's on the NOx side, and there especially where, you know, where 85-90% of the total emissions come from mobile sources is where you see that remaining balance. So that's just want to make sure that was clear as well.
We can only replace tractors so fast. Yeah, so thank you for that. And I think this is like helpful for me to understand what we're going to see in May, and then also what we may see beyond that. And so if I'm understanding correctly, then the fugitive dust rule would just be to further help the case that we're doing some regulations. Okay.
Essentially, yeah. And that rule, the way that this has been, to be clear on that measure, we have yet to notice a proposed rule in that category. The evaluation continues, including trying to estimate the emissions reductions, but also just the stakeholder engagement. You know, in adopting a rule that has impact, in that case to residents, and taking into consideration Supervisor Rickman's concern, for example, we do have to take enough time to develop that rule through meaningful engagement and make sure that what comes to your board is informed by that process. So it's still not a firm commitment, even in terms of amending that rule. But there's certainly interest on our part. We're taking it to the public process, and if it, with your questions and just other perspectives on this, ultimately it's something that we may bring back to the board, but it's still not a for sure until we fully evaluate.
Well, and then
that
just thinking about timeline, you know, this one rule's coming to us in May, right? The measures coming to us in May. But for the July, looking forward at July and looking at this table and kind of what you're saying. So are we expecting to have a FIP issued, or?
Well, I can't speak for EPA, you know, but the proposal that is published now that we anticipate bringing to your board in May, we do think that proposal fully reflects, has been informed by all the conversations that we've had with EPA. We don't know what's going to be in this document to the extent they publish a FIP in July, which is up to EPA in terms of, you know, whether they publish that or what's going to be in that document. But we have been engaging very heavily with Region 9. We've answered a lot of their questions. We provided extensive input into their process. And so we do feel that this document is reflective essentially of what that engagement has produced. And
I think just for the public that may be listening in, I mean, the infeasibility justification is a real part of what they take into consideration as well. It's not just what, you know, the table and that's it, right? The infeasibility justification is a very real component of this. Okay. And so I think one of the things that just kind of looking ahead here on these updates, on these standards, has there been any signaling, or in your conversations moving forward, can there be signaling of EPA putting, you know, they've put out so many rules this year, and I'm gonna give you guys all the credit for that. I just am. I don't care if it's not true. I'm gonna give it to you, just because I know that I don't think anybody, you know, maybe Wayne, you know, but you know, you guys have been certainly at the forefront of pushing EPA and to do these rules, and so exciting. I think, you know, them coming with us, you know, to us, the study session last year with the locomotive, and then now, you know, with the recent announcement earlier this, you know, last week, about cars and trucks. I mean, I feel like we're really moving forward. I would like to see them commit, you know, put those in writing for SJV in our plans. I think it makes sense, and I think it would signal that, you know, that true partnership and commitment that they've stated they want to do. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you, staff, for the report. It was very detailed. Thank you, Samir. Moving on to item 13, adopt proposed amendments to district
Public comments.
rules.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Adopt proposed amendments to district rules 1020, 2201, and 2301.
Good morning, Ms. Chair and members of the board. My name is Morgan Lambert. I'm one of the Deputy Air Pollution Control Officers here at the Air District. And today we'll be asking your board to consider adoption of several rules that affect our permitting program. Just by way of a little bit of background, consistent with both federal and state law, the district operates a permitting program that's designed by, or is required to operate a permitting program that's designed by Congress and the state legislature to allow for industrial growth while tightly controlling emission increases from new and modified facilities here within the valley. And this program is contained within District Rule 2201, our new and modified stationary source review rule, as well as those other two rules we're talking about, 2301 and 1020, have contained definitions and administrative procedures that help support the Rule 2201 implementation. By way of a little bit of background and overview, I know we've talked about these rules and these concepts quite a bit over the last couple of years, but I think it's still important to kind of set the stage as we talk about potential amendments. The district's NSR Rule 2201, is designed to meet both these federal and state requirements that I spoke of. And based on the attainment status and challenges that we have here in the Valley, facilities here are subject to the most stringent NSR requirements that are called for under federal law. Some of the key requirements of Rule 2201 include the mandate that all new and modifying emission units control their emissions to the maximum extent possible under what's called best available control technology. There's also provisions for requiring emissions above certain specified thresholds to be mitigated with reductions either concurrently or through what are called emission reduction credits, or ERCs. It's always very important to note that these ERCs, these credits, it's not like a cap and trade type program. These credits aren't used in lieu of meeting the other requirements in the rules, such as BACT or other prohibitory rules that the district may require through our planning efforts, but it's in addition to and only after those emission reductions take place do offsets enter into the picture. Due to differences between state and federal requirements for offsetting programs under NSR legislation, the district has historically operated a federal offset equivalency system to help ensure that our local NSR requirements are at least as stringent, if not more, as federal requirements for offsetting. And then we also have opportunities under our rule for the public to be engaged and involved in the process as we go through the permitting process. And prior to the issuance of authorities to construct or permit, we have, if it's above certain emission thresholds, we have a process to garner or allow the public to comment on those projects and then to consider those comments as we go through the permitting action. Now, why we're here today with these proposed amendments, there's several different reasons. First off, there are certain remedies within our existing Rule 2201 that address what has to happen if we ever get to that point where that federal equivalency system I was speaking about on the last slide gets to a point where we can no longer show that equivalency. And through a series of actions and events that have happened over the last several years, actions that your board has taken, we are in that place now with both NOx and VOC, where our program is no longer meeting those requirements and the federal requirements. So we have to make some changes to our rule to remedy that situation. There's also specific commitments that the district made in response to a recent review of the district's offsetting program. As you recall, back in 2019-2020 timeframe, CARB had conducted a review of the district's ERC and offsetting program. And as part of that, highlighted some areas that there was some room for improvement in our program, and that the board, the district, made a set of commitments to address those issues. Those commitments have basically been put into force and have been made at this point, but these rule amendments will help formalize and complete that cycle with those commitments with CARB. And then lastly, back about this time last year, EPA proposed what's called a limited approval, limited disapproval of a 2019 version of this rule. And as part of this action, we're addressing those approvability issues that were in that, or that are in that proposed action on the 19 version of the rule. So this action before you today really represents the latest in a series of actions taken by the board, really aimed at enhancing transparency, rigor, and public engagement surrounding the district's NSR program, our ERC program, as well as the federal offset equivalency program. As a summary of the proposed, I'll get into some more of the details in the next few slides, but as a summary of the proposed amendments to the three rules before you, first and probably most significantly, these rules contain an amended approach to addressing federal offsetting requirements, as well as changes to our offset equivalency tracking system. Second, there are enhancements through this proposed enhancements to the public noticing requirements that our rules require, specifically for minor sources, and I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. It also includes a revised definition of routine replacement emission unit as it affects major sources and when people go and they replace pieces of equipment at their facilities and what those requirements would be in those circumstances. It also addresses some application timeliness procedure issues for the people who apply to have emission reductions that they've done at their facilities recognized as emission reduction credits. We also have included some definitions of what are called unbanked shutdown emission reductions. And these are basically emission reductions that when the facility doesn't apply for ERCs, the district can then bank those credits and then use those to satisfy certain offsetting obligations, either through equivalency or make available to facilities to use. We're also proposing to discontinue the banking of new greenhouse gas credits under our emission reduction credit banking rule, and we'll discuss that a little bit more as well as updating some definitions of PM10 and volatile organic compounds and a host of other administrative change and rule clarifications with the overall goal of bringing these rules into full conformance with federal and state law, as well as doing our best to enhance transparency of the process that we're doing and increase overall clarity of the rule requirements. So as I talked about, the most significant changes and adjustments that we made are really focusing on offsetting. And here we're focusing and proposing a multi-path approach to offsetting. Along that first path is the path for NOx and VOC emissions. And under that scenario, for any new major source or federal major modification, and so what constitutes a new major source and what constitutes a federal modification, those are outlined in federal NSR requirements. But at a high level, what this would require is that any such project would be required to fully satisfy federal offsetting program requirements without any equivalency determinations being made. So basically integrate a full federal program for that. And what that means is that the quantity of offsets that are being calculated, how those offsets are being assessed and calculated, as well as what's called how those credits are valued would follow the full federal guidance. And most significantly among those is that those credits would be required to be surplus at time of use. And what that basically means is that when an emission reduction happens and when someone gets issued an emission reduction credit, we initially value that emission reduction at the time it was banked, at the time that project came forward, and that emission reduction actually occurred. What happens over time, especially in an area like ours, as we adopt new rules, new regulations, have new plans that go into effect, some of those emission reductions that happen may have happened through these plans over time, these rules over time. And so under the federal program, when that ERC is going to be used, you have to account for all those later reductions that would have happened through implementation of future iterations of rules. And so that's what it means to be surplus at time of use, that those reductions are still surplus of any rules or plan commitments that we have on the books at the time that they are being used. And that's different than how ERCs are handled under state law, which is under the further guidance I'll talk about a little bit later. It is important to note that both of these approaches are currently in place now and have been since about the end of 2020 for NOx and VOC. As we've continued along this journey that we've had and made adjustments and made changes within our equivalency approach, we have triggered some of these remedies already. And so this is really just formalizing this approach in our current, our new NSR rule. So hopefully it'll get approved by the federal government. We are also making another clarification in our rule, which is that for projects that do trigger this federal offsetting requirement, they don't also trigger district offset requirements as well. So they're not subject to both of these requirements. They're basically subject to the more stringent of the two requirements. And since the federal requirements programmatically are more stringent at this point in time compared to the local requirements for NOx and VOC, it's appropriate to subject those new major sources and those federal major modifications solely to the federal requirements at this time. Now, for all other projects that may require offsetting, so basically those that aren't new major sources or federal major modifications, there are no changes being proposed to the rule requirements in terms of how offsets are used. So those are still going to be subject to the existing state requirements for offset use. Now, kind of the other main path along this journey is for PM10, PM2.5, and SOx emissions, and when offsets are required for those. So under the proposed rule, we're proposing to maintain an equivalency approach for the federal offsetting requirements for these pollutants. Programmatically, our rule is still much more stringent than federal requirements for these pollutants. Our offsetting thresholds are generally lower here in California than the similar thresholds under the federal requirements, and also our ratios basically for when you do offsetting, for every pound of emissions, you're generally required to provide something more in terms of the offsetting. Usually it's in the realm of 1.3 to 1 or 1.5 to 1. And so those ratios that we have are more stringent in our local rule and in California compared to the federal requirements. And in coming forward with this proposal, it's important to note that we did make a lot of adjustments in the equivalency, the balances that we had in our equivalency program. We did the same adjustments that we made for NOx and VOC, we made for these banks as well. And even after we made those adjustments, there's still adequate margin, and those banks remain in equivalency even after we made those changes to address the CARB review. So we're confident in moving forward with a proposal, and we think that in our discussions with EPA and CARB, that they also feel that it's still appropriate to maintain an equivalency system for these pollutants. So what that means at the end of the day is that for all projects that come forward that trigger an offsetting requirement for these pollutants, they basically require local offsetting subject to those rules. So the quantities that we calculate here under our rule based on the California law, as well as those emissions offsets can be satisfied with reductions that are valued at the time of banking or issuance, which is again consistent with state law and historic district practice. So at a high level, the offsetting requirements for these pollutants are not expected to change. Now, how we demonstrate equivalency with those, we are proposing some adjustments and some changes, which I'll talk about as well in the next few slides. So in terms of the equivalency tracking system, the process whereby we go each year to how we demonstrate to EPA satisfaction that our program continues to meet federal requirements, this rule is proposing several changes. First off from that is that NOx and VOC will no longer be tracked under the program. Because we are transitioning or have transitioned to a full federal implementation of those requirements, there's no longer a need to demonstrate equivalency with those. And so we are removing those. This is consistent with how we've been handling the last couple of demonstrations that we've done for equivalency have not included NOx and VOC because now they're required to do that and meet the full federal requirements. We're also proposing to remove carbon monoxide from the tracking system as well. And this is because the district has long been in attainment with carbon monoxide, and we now have completed our 2 required maintenance periods. So for over 20 years, we've been able to demonstrate ongoing that we are in attainment. And these requirements on the federal side are only for non-attainment pollutants. And so at this point in time, we think it's appropriate to remove carbon monoxide from this. Now, there are still local requirements for carbon monoxide. It's just not subject to the federal requirements any longer. And then for PM10, PM2.5, and SOx, which we are proposing to retain an equivalency system, they will obviously remain in the tracking system, but we're doing some modifications here. First off, under our old system, there was kind of 2 tests that you had to pass every year. One was a quantity test, making sure that overall your local program required the same quantity of offsets as the federal requirement would require. Second was that surplus test, that overall you're requiring enough surplus at time of use adjusted credit to meet the federal obligation. This procedure proved to be kind of complicated as well as confusing, I think, as we try to demonstrate this every year. And so in discussions with EPA and CARB, we've determined that it really needs to be one test with a single point that we're shooting for, which is that at the end of the day, that the quantity of surplus emission reductions valued the way that the federal government values them is being met. So a much simpler approach to actually demonstrate accounting simpler, how we can represent this to the public is simpler, and we think that'll be a good enhancement to the program. And it's something that EPA suggested as part of their action that they took last year. We've also proposed a host of other adjustments to the equivalency demonstration that hopefully will improve rule clarity and transparency to the program. And then probably most importantly, we're also transitioning the equivalency system from an annual demonstration to a system that demonstrates ongoing equivalency at the time of A to C issuance. And this was again to address some comments that EPA had in their proposed action. So what this really means in the real world is that as each A to C project that is either a new major source or federal major modification, at the time before the district can basically issue that authority to construct, we'll have to demonstrate that equivalency can continue to be made before we can proceed with that preliminary decision. In the past, what happened was, as we went throughout the year, these projects would be issued, and then at the end of the year, we basically do a true-up that would show that throughout the year, the debits and credits basically balanced out at the end of the year. So now that had the potential to basically allow for a deficit or a lag in equivalency at the end of the year. And so to address that issue, we're moving to this approach where before we issue any authority to construct, we go through the process of actually showing if that project by itself does not satisfy federal offsetting obligations, we show that there are enough other credible reductions that can be used to make up that shortfall before that project is actually issued. And so under this approach, there's no potential for operation of the program at any deficit or lag between an equivalency failure and the required remedies that are invoked by the rule. This demonstration will be, for transparency purposes, this demonstration will be included as part of the ATC application review, which is already subject to EPA, CARB, and public review before we finalize it. So if there's any questions about how we're using credits, how we're meeting equivalency, people will have the opportunity, EPA and CARB will have the opportunity prior to finalization of the project to provide comments on that. We will still be doing an annual equivalency report, but that report will really be a summary of the previous year's projects and updates at that point in time to any remaining carryover balances that remain in the system for each pollutant, and will no longer be the primary focus of the equivalency demonstration. There's also several other areas within the rule that I'll highlight quickly here that we're proposing some changes. Mainly for clarity and transparency purposes, we're including a lot of specific federal definitions in our rule itself, rather than just having references, to some, arcane federal NSR requirement. We think this will help, especially as we've transitioned the program for NOx and VOC to a full federal program. To have these definitions in our rule helps with the overall clarity of the rule. We're also enhancing the public noticing requirements to include facilities that are nearing a major source threshold. So there's a whole host of current thresholds within our rule under which you would be required to provide public notice. As part of this action, we felt it was appropriate that as a facility starts getting a little bit larger and is nearing a major source threshold, especially in the circumstances where they're taking enforceable limits to prevent themselves from being a major source, we think it's appropriate to have the public as well as EPA and CARB have the ability to evaluate the appropriateness of those enforceable limits and perhaps provide comments on that before finalizing a permit. And so that's being set at 80% of the major source threshold. We think that's projects below that. We've done an analysis as part of this rulemaking to show that they're insignificant in terms of our attainment challenges. And so we think that this is a good marker for looking at these potential projects. We're also proposing to remove what are called interpollutant offsetting trading allowances for ozone precursors. And this is basically resulting from a recent outcome of some litigation between the Sierra Club and EPA, which said that it's no longer, EPA long had procedures and allowances for doing this, but now with this court case, we can no longer do this any longer, so we're removing it from our rule. Also, changing or revising a definition for routine replacement emission unit at major sources. And basically what this means is that if there's an existing major source that has a piece of equipment, if they're replacing that whole piece of equipment, it can no longer be exempt from having to do the analysis of if offsets are required, if back is the term is required. Now we have to go through the process of evaluating that consistent with federal requirements to determine what things are required for that routine replacement. Also, now explicitly including federal visibility requirements. This is something that has long been required as part of a statewide federal implementation plan, but we felt it was appropriate to actually explicitly require these now in our rule. And basically, what this requirement is that for certain projects that may have the ability to impact the visibility in a Class 1 area like national park, national wilderness area, it gives the federal land managers, they basically have the ability to comment on those projects and to do an assessment of whether or not they think it will have an adverse impact, and to provide those comments to the district, which then we need to consider before we finalize the project. There's also some additional requirements that get into stack height procedures and other provisions to determine making sure that the projects that are being proposed adhere to good engineering principles, something that's always been done, but we're now bringing them in specifically into our rule. Now on switching gears a little bit to our ERC banking rule, which is really the administrative process behind how you can bank credits that can be then used as offsets under our NSR rule. Kind of the most significant change that we're making in terms of rule language, although it's not really a change in terms of implementation, is doing some amendments around the application timeliness procedures, like when somebody actually has to apply to the district to be able to go through the process of banking a credit. Our existing rule had some confusing language that was a little bit ambiguous. So back since the early 90s, we've had longstanding policy on how to implement that. As part of the CARB review, they suggested that needs to explicitly be in your rule to remove that ambiguity that's in our rule. So we're proposing to include that longstanding policy in the rule language to make it crystal clear what those timeliness procedures, when you need to actually apply. We're also proposing to discontinue the banking of new greenhouse gas credits under our rule. Originally, these provisions were adopted to accommodate requests from stakeholders, given the lack of avenues at the time to credit greenhouse gas reductions. At the time, it was thought that perhaps as cap and trade came online, that there may be some avenues for using some of these reductions to satisfy some of those requirements. Since that time, there's no longer a need for this avenue because there's many different other avenues out there for how people can credit and take advantage of and monetize these greenhouse gas reductions. And so it's not something that we see a lot of use in, and we think at this time it makes sense to kind of discontinue the generation of these new credits under the district's programs. And it is important to note that it's not really part of our NSR rule. These credits can't be used to satisfy any requirements under our permitting program. It was really just a mechanism, a point-in-time mechanism to recognize some of these that may be able to be used in other avenues. And so, but we think at this point in time, it no longer makes sense for this to be in the district's rule. And then we're also including a definition of what are called unbanked shutdown emission reductions. Now, these have long been part of our program, but there wasn't a specific, it was very like high-level rule language that allowed this. And so we wanted to be much more explicit in what the avenues are, what the criteria are for the district to be able to create these take advantage of these emission reductions that have happened where a facility does not bank them, and then to be able to use these in differing circumstances to satisfy NSR requirements. And then kind of lastly, in terms of the rule changes, is our definitions rule. As we move through this process, we found the need to make a few changes in this rule as well. First off, we needed to update our VOC definition, specifically to exclude some new compounds that the EPA has determined are basically not significant in creating ozone. So periodically, EPA will go through the process of reevaluating compounds that they exempt from the VOC definition. Once they make those determinations, we're then required to update our rule to reflect that. And so that's basically what we're doing here. We're also proposing to move our definition of PM 2.5, which used to be in our NSR rule, over to our definitions rule. It just makes more sense to have it there. That's where our other definitions of pollutants are, so we're moving it over there. And then lastly, consistent with the district's historic practice and to improve clarity of the rule, we're amending our PM10 definition to make it clear that PM10 includes both filterable particulates as well as condensable particulates. And basically what that means is that at stack temperatures, at the elevated temperatures that come out of a stack, there's certain things that may not be particulate, but once they get into the atmosphere and cool down, they become particulate. And so that's always been something we've required. That's how we analyze projects. But we thought it would be good to make it explicit in here, but it's really no change to how the program works. Now, the process leading up to here, we've had a very extensive rulemaking process, and even before the rulemaking process, we had several years worth of additional work that led to that rulemaking process. We held a scoping meeting back in April of 2022. We've had 3 public workshops in June, October, and February. We had initial draft documents and concepts published back in October of last year. And then these rules, as they're before you today, were out for public review and comment by March 21st of 2023 as required by state law. This is something that we've regularly discussed at a variety of meetings, including the Citizens Advisory Committee and at your governing board. And there's been ongoing opportunities for public input throughout the entire process. The comments that we have received on the rule, the formal comments we have received, have been primarily technical in nature, and the responses to those comments have been included in the appendix to the staff report. So with that, and I know it's a lot, what we're here today is to recommend that your board adopt the proposed amendments to Rule 2201, 2301, and 1020, and to authorize the chair to sign the attached resolution. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Lambert. Do we have any questions from the board? Dr. Scher.
Thank you for all of that heavy lifting. I'm wondering where the district's gym is that the staff are working out in to be. There's a lot in this. There is a lot in this. The emission reduction credit issues are, they're a lot to wrap our heads around and try to understand. I do have one question regarding time of use. So NOx and VOX will no longer be time of issue, but rather time of use. And the rationale being things have happened in the meantime in terms of what's required that would change the value of that, if I understood that. But that's different than what we're doing with PM10, 2.5, and SOx, which are still going to be time of issue. And so I'm wondering about the rationale and how we...
So that's a very good question. So, yeah, and to clarify, for NOx and VOC, that has been the case since, I think, September of 2020. We have been requiring that. So the big issue really surrounds kind of the way that the state of California and the federal government have evaluated these and looked at these credits. And in the state, there's always been an understanding and the way that they put the requirements in place were that if you basically devalue these credits over time, you lose, because these all come from voluntary emission reductions. So that's an important thing to note, that these aren't reductions that are coming because they're being forced by a rule or regulation, whether it's a local rule, a federal rule, state rule, whatever. They're all above and beyond, they're all voluntary. And so the way to incentivize that is to have some kind of value behind the credit, right? A monetary value behind the credit. So the concern at the state level has always been, to the extent that you devalue those credits, and at times it could be very quickly devalue those credits, you start losing that incentive for people to go out and do voluntary reductions. Now, I will say that and oftentimes at the state level, the requirements for when these are triggered are much lower, and they're required in larger levels, especially for those other pollutants, than they are at the federal level. Now, when we do the equivalency for that, we still do, even though we're requiring time of use or time of banking, those credits, along with additional credits that we may bring in, we still have to show that the time of use value of those credits is equivalent or more than what would have been required under a federal program. So we're still demonstrating overall that we're meeting or would meet a strict federal implementation of the requirements. It's just that because we go above and beyond what the requirements are, the position that California has always taken is that it creates a disincentive for people to go and try to create these credits if come tomorrow you take some significant portion of the value away.
So, in a sense, I mean, it's our decision, but it's not our decision. It's a state policy to encourage for those particular pollutants to continue to base the value on the time of issue.
I think to the extent that we can still
So moving forward, to encourage people to continue to participate in these kinds of things and to voluntarily do more for those particular pollutants.
I think that's a good way to summarize it. Yeah, I think the state's position overall is for all ERCs. I don't mean to talk for the state, but they have letters that they've provided EPA over the time that have justified this position. But to the extent that you can continue to maintain equivalency with the federal program, that's how the state law is basically interpreted and read. And so now, because of the issues with NOx and VOC, we need to move there to be able to continue to operate a program that conforms with federal requirements. On the PM side, because we're so much more stringent still, we have the opportunity, the flexibility to still operate a program under California requirements. Thank you.
I see no other board comments. This is a public hearing, so Madam Clerk.
Are there any public comments in Bakersfield?
No public comment in Bakersfield.
Thank you. Are there any public comments in Modesto?
There are no public comments in Modesto.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public in Fresno who would like to comment? Seeing none, we do have one commenter online. Sorry, there's not a name at the phone number. Go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Could you please give your name?
Thanks. It's Cynthia Pinto Cabrera with the Central Valley Air Quality Coalition, and apologies for not being on mute. There was some issues where I couldn't see the unmute button, and Kevin Hamilton said he was having the same issues, but thank you for the work on these rule amendments. Just wanted to make some quick, short comments about our interpretation of 2201, where we believe that there is, within the rule, there's the potential to be able to address some of the historic failures of the ERC's programs. And I'm sure the board, you are all familiar with, should be familiar with some of the issues that, CARB found in the use of this emission reductions banking system, where, they couldn't recreate a lot of the calculations that were made, where they found where the credits were overvalued. So I think we appreciate the rule amendments moving forward, but continue to see issues with the lack of addressing a lot of these historic failures. So we would like to just reiterate to the board that we believe that under 2201, there is the ability to be able to address some of the historic issues, and hope to continue to work on this issue with you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we have another online comment, Christine Zimmerman.
Hi, this is Christine Zimmerman with Western States Petroleum Association. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
I apologize, Chairwoman. I'm traveling today, so I may not sound as good as I usually try to. Just wanted to make a quick comment to point out all of the tremendous amount of work that's been done by your board's staff, as well as by US EPA and CARB. There's been tremendous effort all along the way to gain alignment. There was a significant amount of research done at CARB's direction. And it's our opinion that the look back was sufficient. And numerous times we've heard EPA and CARB advise staff that the work had been done and that a robust rule had been developed and that these rules could be adopted and that we could go on. And so I just wanted to point that out to the board, thank them for their efforts with staff, and ultimately thank staff for what was a tremendous effort through the Public Advisory Work Group, which I was fortunate to serve on, and throughout the process. And those are my comments. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
There's no further indication of online comments.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. So if there are no other board comments, I'd like to call for a vote, please.
Motion to approve the proposed amendments to Rule 2201, 2301, and 1020, and also authorize the chair to sign the attached resolution.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. May we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Mr. Bessinger?
Yes.
Mr. Couch?
Yes.
Ms. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Mendez?
Yes.
Dr. Pacheco Warner?
Yes.
Mr. Pereira?
Aye.
Mr. Rickman?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Dr. Sheriff?
Yes.
Ms. Shiglian?
Aye.
Through the chair, motion passes.
Thank you very much. Item 14, a verbal report on California Air Resources Board activities. Dr. Pacheco Warner?
Yeah, thank you, Vice Chair. Next week, we will be voting on the Advanced Clean Fleets rule, which is super exciting for me because those reductions of NOx and PM 2.5 from that rule of phasing out diesel medium and heavy duty vehicles will be mostly felt in the San Joaquin Valley and South Coast. So it's a really great moment that I think everyone who has been on our board has been waiting for, to really see those diesel reductions coming down from the state, and it's here. And some of those reductions will begin to be seen as soon as next year, which is really exciting. Next week as well, we will be voting on another thing. I think my friend here to the left will be happy to know we're doing an in-use locomotive rule as well, to phase out use in California of some of the oldest engines. So very exciting. We can talk more offline about all of the resistance to that, but I think it's an exciting place for California to go. And I think that once again, we were kind of a step ahead in pushing at what we're now seeing at the federal level on both of these items. So just so exciting to be attending that meeting next week in person. I'm making it a point to be there in person just because it's such an important votes for the San Joaquin Valley. Really proud of that. And I think that's all I'll share for today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're moving on to item 15, Executive Director Report, APCO comments.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, and just have a few here. I'm looking at the clock. I will speed through them and try to keep us on time here. I wanted to just give you a couple of key updates, starting with the legislative session. There's a lot of bills that are working their way through the process. The first round of policy committees are coming up next week. We've been engaged in that process consistent with the board's adopted legislative platform, including on the budget. You heard some discussion earlier about the farmer funding as one of the key priorities. Just wanted to let the board know that there's quite a bit of activity going on in that space and trying to provide the education and advocating on behalf of the Valley. I also wanted to mention that we will soon hopefully be appointing the two new board members for the two vacant city seats here shortly and in time for our May board meeting. So we'll definitely send information out about that as soon as that is confirmed and in place. But we will have a full board at that point and have been going through that process here for the last several months to work with the cities to make that happen. I also wanted to congratulate Dr. Pacheco Warner on her recent, I hope this is appropriate here, but as executive director of the what does that acronym stand for? That's the California Central Valley Health Policy Institute. I guess, yeah, CVHPI. So just a great moment there for the board member there in that really important role. And also want to mention the governing board study session. We are looking to try to get that scheduled the week after Thanksgiving. Appreciate the board members that have already provided some feedback on that. Once that date and location are settled, because the location is also still being worked on, we will definitely send that information out to the board and make it available to the public as well. Just wanted to give you a heads up on that. A lot of work going on with the various federal funding streams. We're seeing different federal agencies opening up either public commenting or actually opening up RFPs for different programs. We're trying to make sure that the Valley gets its fair share of that funding. So we're either applying directly or trying to support various stakeholders in the Valley that are going after that money. Want to also mention that the American Lung Association report came out recently. It did highlight, I think this was mentioned earlier during the public comment, the significant improvements that we're making in the Valley, but also, especially with the wildfire impacts, some of the remaining challenges that we see here. You probably saw some news about that in the last couple of days. And I will close out by just stating, and I'll just echo my inner Jamie here, that we will be at multiple Earth Day events. I can't quite replicate Jamie. She's one of a kind. Multiple Earth Day events throughout the Valley this weekend, and we're going to be at all of these different events and just engaging with the public, and just really happy to report that. And that concludes my updates, and happy to take questions if anybody has any.
Thank you. Are there any questions for our executive director? Thank you very much. So we'll move on to item 16, governing board member comments. Do we have any comments from the governing board? Well, I see no comments. I'll just say thank you all for tolerating me today. Few errors, but I'm learning.
No, 12:02.
Yeah, you did a great job. Don't knock yourself there.
Okay, and moving on to item 17, closed session, and I'll turn it over to our board counsel.
Thank you. Yes, we have a closed session on one lawsuit. It's anticipated litigation at this point, and so it will be advisory only, and so no public comment is necessary at this time.
Thank you very much. And at this time, we adjourn the meeting.
Well, we go into closed session and
Okay.
we adjourn
All
after
right.
closed session.
So we'll move into closed session at this time. Thank you.